Chapter 1510. It turned out that unlike the other Wu people, Wu Gang was born from a drop of Pan Gu's blood pool. The so-called Pan Gu blood pool was a pool formed entirely from Pan Gu's blood. Back then, after Pan Gu created the world, his 12 drops of spirit blood turned into 12 Zhu Wus, and some of his blood fell on the ground. Pan Gu was incomparably tall and strong, and a drop of blood was as big as a small pool. Every drop of blood fell on the ground, a Pan Gu blood pool would be born. At the beginning, ordinary Wu people were born from these Pan Gu blood pools. The Pangu blood pool was like the mother of the Wu clan. Therefore, the Pangu blood pool was protected by the Wu clan with all their strength. Almost every clan of the Wu clan was built around a Pangu blood pool. Among the opposite sex, Wu people could also give birth to new Wu people through reproduction. However, such Wu people were born with weak bodies, and could only stay at the level of novice magi for the rest of their lives, and could never make any progress. Only the Wu people born from Pan Gu blood pool had pure bloodlines, and could reach the level of senior magi at most. These Wu people were the true pillars of Wu people. However, the speed at which Wu people were born from Pan Gu blood pool was very slow, and as time went by, the amount of Pan Gu's blood in Pan Gu blood pool became less and less. Therefore, the number of pure-blooded Wu people born from Pan Gu blood pool became fewer and fewer. Sometimes, only 2 or 3 pure-blooded Wu people were born in 100 years, and these pure-blooded Wu people were the absolute treasures of every clan. Wu Gang was a pure-blooded Wu people born from Pan Gu blood pool. 100 years after Wu Gang was born, 2 pure-blooded Wu people were born from 2 different Pan Gu blood pools. One of them was Hu Yi from the Dijiang tribe, and the other was Chang Yi from the Hutu tribe. The 3 shamans were born with no animal characteristics, and they were almost exactly the same as humans. Therefore, the 3 of them naturally became extremely good friends. They had been living together since they were young, and it had been 30,000 years since then. However, as time went by, the conflict between the 3 gradually emerged, and the source of the conflict was the only female Wu people, Chang Yi. Everyone knew about Chang Yi. She was a unique beauty in the world, and her beauty was beyond imagination. It was said that she was many times more beautiful than Goddess Nua. Naturally, such a beauty attracted the hearts of both Hu Yi and Wu Gang. When they were young, they didn't think much of it. But when they became adults, Hu Yi and Wu Gang began to fight over Chang Yi. The 2 of them almost fought each other. If Chang Yi hadn't arrived in time to stop them, one of the 3 would have died. Chang Yi felt that the situation couldn't continue like this. She had to clearly reject one of them and make them give up. But after all, they were all childhood friends. Chang Yi couldn't bear to reject any one of them, so she made an agreement with Wu Gang and Hu Yi. Whoever could kill the golden crow in the sky and avenge Kwafu, Chang Yi would choose him as her husband. Grand Shaman Kwafu was the tree man who had fought with Guhan in the Shanhai Pass. Because of their appearance, they were ostracized by the pure-blooded Wu people when they were young and received a lot of cold looks. It was Grand Shaman Kwafu who protected the 3 of them and raised them at the same time. Their relationship with Grand Shaman Kwafu was as close as that of a father and son. The Golden Crow was the son of Di Jun, the 2 supreme leaders of the heavenly court of the demon clan. They usually stood on the Fusang tree, and only one of them could fly in the sky every day. It was like the setting sun and rising sun, indicating the existence of the day. But one day, the golden crow that came out to play landed on the ground, and happened to stay in the position of Kwafu's tribe. The blazing fire roasted the land like a sea of fire. 3 tribes under Kwafu's control were burned to ashes by the fire, and tens of thousands of Wu people died. Kwafu was furious and kept chasing the golden crow until he was exhausted. He drank all the water in the Yangtze River and Yellow River, but still couldn't replenish the water in his body. In the end, he was exhausted and turned into a peachwood forest. This was the legend of Kwafu chasing the sun that everyone in Huaxia was familiar with, and this legend actually happened according to Wu Gang. After Kwafu's death, the 3 of them were extremely sad and regarded the golden crow that killed Kwafu as their father's murderer. Their biggest goal in life was to kill the golden crow and avenge Kwafu. This was the condition set by Chang Yi. She was willing to marry whoever could kill the golden crow first and avenge Kwafu. Wu Gang and Hu Yi had nothing to say about this. They both patted their chests and promised that they would be the first to kill the Golden Crow and avenge Kwafu. After that, Wu Gang and Hu Yi completely separated. They both thought about how to kill the Golden Crow. Wu Gang knew very well that he was far weaker than Kwafu. Even Kwafu couldn't kill the Golden Crow, so he couldn't just recklessly go up and kill it. Wu Gang had to find a way to restrain the Golden Crow. Later on, Wu Gang passed by an old man who was wandering around. The old man said that he was the Lord Taishang of the Tushito Palace and asked for a cup of water. After Wu Gang gave him the water, the Lord Taishang said that he was willing to promise Wu Gang one thing, so Wu Gang asked him how he could kill the Golden Crow. The Lord Taishang touched his beard and said that there was a kind of tree in this world called the Moon Cassia tree. It came from the same origin as the Fuso tree where the Golden Crow's origin was. They were like brother and sister. However, the Fuso tree was born with the attribute of fire, so it was an object of extreme yang. On the other hand, the Moon Cassia tree was born with the attribute of water, so it was an object of extreme yin. Therefore, if he wanted to kill the Golden Crow, he had to find a branch of the Moon Cassia tree and make an arrow out of it. As long as the arrow could pierce through the Golden Crow's chest, the Golden Crow would definitely die. Wu Gang was overjoyed. He didn't know where the other things were, but he knew where the Moon Cassia tree was. Because this laurel tree was a treasure of the Chongliang tribe, it was planted near the Chongliang tribe. However, this laurel tree looked ordinary, no different from an ordinary tree. Even the osmanthus flowers it bloomed were not as fragrant as other osmanthus trees. The people of the Chongliang tribe didn't know what the laurel tree was used for, so they just let it stay there for a long time. Therefore, Wu Gang immediately ran to the side of the Moon Cassia tree with his axe. He wanted to cut off the branches of the Moon Cassia tree to make the arrow that the Lord Taishang mentioned. However, when Wu Gang began to swing the axe, he found that the Moon Cassia tree was indeed a divine art comparable to the Fuso tree. The wood was extremely hard, so it was difficult for Wu Gang's axe to cut through it. Every time Wu Gang finally cut off half of the branches, the original wounds on the branches would immediately heal and return to their original appearance. No matter how many times Wu Gang cut it, the result was the same. Wu Gang cut the branches for 100 years. He thought that as long as he persisted, he would be able to cut through metal and stone with sincerity. However, the Moon Cassia tree didn't move at all. Wu Gang was about to go crazy. Later, Wu Gang carefully recalled what Lord Taishang had said to him and suddenly remembered that Lord Taishang had indeed said that the Moon Cassia tree was mysterious and unpredictable. Even the best primordial spiritual treasure in the world couldn't hurt the Moon Cassia tree at all. In this world, only the 4 immortal killing swords of sect leader Tongtian could cut off a branch of the Moon Cassia tree. After recalling these words, Wu Gang went straight to the Aquamarine Palace, intending to enter the Aquamarine Palace to borrow a sword from sect leader Tongtian. However, the Aquamarine Palace was the land of the sages, so it was heavily guarded. How could a mere heaven wizard like Wu Gang enter? He was directly stopped by the disciples of sect leader Tongtian who were guarding at the door. They did not let Wu Gang enter at all. Wu Gang originally wanted to ask sect leader Tongtian to borrow a sword from him. However, he learned that sect leader Tongtian had explicitly stated that he would never accept any Wu people as his disciples. Wu Gang had no choice but to return and continue to try to cut off the Moon Cassia tree. At the same time, he racked his brains for a way to meet sect leader Tongtian. As a result, Guhan appeared at the right time. After learning that Guhan had a letter that could allow him to meet sect leader Tongtian, Wu Gang immediately planned to ask Guhan to borrow a sword from sect leader Tongtian. After all, this was the only way he could think of to meet sect leader Tongtian. Therefore, he quickly changed his enthusiasm. It turned out that he wanted to ask Guhan for help. No wonder this guy has been cutting trees on the moon all his life. There's something wrong with his head. The 4 immortal killing swords are the most precious treasures of sect leader Tongtian. Sect leader Tongtian won't even lend them to his fellow disciples. How could he lend them to a magistrate like Wu Gang? Guhan laughed in his heart. However, Wu Gang's purpose was exactly the same as Guhan's. They both hoped to get the 4 immortal killing swords from sect leader Tongtian. This was a kind of fate. At the same time, Guhan remembered that according to the records in the Sage Relic, there were two direct causes of the Great War of Sorcery and Demon. One was that Zhu Wu was seriously injured in the battle between Zhu Rong and Gong Gong. As a result, the 12 Zhu Wu were unable to form the 12 divine beings killing formation. As a result, the demon tribe seized the opportunity and launched an all-out attack. The second was that Hu Yi shot the sun and killed Emperor Jun's 9 sons of Jinwu. The demon tribe was extremely angry with the Wu people. The combination of these two factors finally led to the Great War of Sorcery and Demon, which destroyed the two powerful races, the demon tribe and the Wu people. If the memory in the Sage Relic was correct, Wu Gang became one of the direct causes of the Great War of Sorcery and Demon, which led to the destruction of the entire Wu people. However, since this arrow was made by Wu Gang, how could it fall into the hands of Hu Yi and eventually become Hu Yi shooting the sun? Returning to the main topic, Guhan naturally agreed to Wu Gang's request. When he got the immortal trapping sword, it was not impossible for Wu Gang to cut off a branch of the laurel tree. Therefore, under Wu Gang's enthusiastic guidance, the two of them set off. In order to speed up the time, Guhan directly took Wu Gang through the hollow and hurried through the hollow. Therefore, it only took them 5 days to reach the gate of the Aquamarine Palace in Penglai Island. Then, they were stopped by a half-acquaintance of Guhan. "Why are you here again? We have said that you are not allowed to come in," Zhao Gongming, the god of fortune, said disdainfully. Chapter 15:11. Wu Gang's face turned red, and he wanted to twist the head of this guy in front of him. But thinking of Chang Yi's beautiful face, Wu Gang finally restrained himself and said embarrassedly, "I'm not here to go in this time. I'm here with my friend. My friend said that he had an important letter to deliver to sect leader Tongtian, but he got lost on the way and didn't know the way to the Aquamarine Palace. That's why I specially brought him here." Delivering a letter. Zhao Gongming's face changed. His master, sect leader Tongtian, had already become a sage. There were probably less than 10 people in the world who had the guts to deliver a letter to sect leader Tongtian. This guy's background might not be ordinary, so Zhao Gongming's face immediately became better. He looked at Guhan with a smile and asked, "Fellow Daoist, may I know which Venerable's disciple you are? Are you the disciple of the 2 Venerables in the West?" Zhao Gongming guessed that Guhan was the disciple of Sage Xuanti and Sage Jirin. Although Guhan, who was accepted by Buddha on behalf of his master, was indeed the disciple of Sage Jirin, Guhan did not have a good impression of Buddhism and did not want to admit that he was the disciple of Sage Jirin and Sage Xuanti. So he shook his head and said, "No. Then you are the disciple of Goddess Enviwa and Emperor Fuxi?" Zhao Gongming asked again. "No, although I have admired them for a long time, I have never seen them." Guhan denied again. "Then are you the messenger of East Emperor Taiyi and Emperor Jun?" Zhao Gongming's face became a little ugly again. Neither Wu people nor the demon clan was favored by the Aquamarine Palace. "That's not true. Although the two of them are noble, what relationship do they have with me?" Ji Yu Han denied it again. "Where did this guy come from? Who is behind him? How dare he directly deliver a letter to master?" Zhao Gongming became very confused. He had asked the names of all the venerables who were qualified to deliver a letter to master, but Guhan was not their subordinate. Then who was Guhan's subordinate? In fact, Zhao Gongming had not asked the 3 venerables, namely Taishang Laojun, Yuansha Tianzuan, and Hongjun Ancestor. It was just that Hongjun Ancestor hadn't appeared for millions of years, and there were only 2 Taoist children, a boy and a girl. He was definitely not the adult in front of him. As for Taishang Laojun and the Heavenly Lord of Primordial Beginning, Zhao Gongming couldn't be more familiar with them. At this time, the disciples of the 3 religions had a very good relationship. Zhao Gongming often interacted with the 12 golden immortals of the Chan school and the disciples of the Ren school. They often drank together and discussed cultivation experiences. Their relationship was very good, so Zhao Gongming could be sure that the guy in front of him was definitely not a disciple of the 3 religions. Actually, Zhao Gongming's thinking was a bit biased here. Ji Yu Han was indeed a disciple of old Lord Taishang, and he was the last disciple. It was just that old Lord Taishang only accepted him as a disciple a few million years later. However, if Zhao Gongming were to ask if Ji Yuhan was old Lord Taishang's disciple, then Ji Yuhan would definitely admit that he was old Lord Taishang's disciple out of respect for his master. Unfortunately, Zhao Gongming took it for granted and did not continue to ask. He just asked doubtfully, "Then who are you? If you are a nobody, I won't accept your letter." "Fine." Gu Han sighed and said, "I just want to pass a word. I hope you can tell this word to Sect Master Tongtian. If Sect Master Tongtian knows this word and doesn't want to see me, I will turn around and leave without saying a word. One word, I want to see my master." Zhao Gongming was shocked. Although he felt that the fellow in front of him might be deliberately mystifying, the curiosity in his heart could not be any greater. After thinking about it again and again, he finally nodded and said, "All right, tell me this word, and I'll help you tell master. This word has no sound and only has shape. I will write it for you." Ji Yuhan casually plucked a branch from a tree and wrote the word in front of Zhao Gongming. Such a simple word. It's just 2 pictures. Zhao Gongming felt strange. It should be known that the characters of the prehistoric era were basically oracle bone inscriptions, bell cauldron inscriptions, hieroglyphics, and so on. Any word had dozens of strokes, just like a drawing. Zhao Gongming had never seen such a simple word that could be written with only 2 sentences. However, just by looking at this word, Zhao Gongming felt as if something was squeezing his heart forcefully. His heartbeat sped up by more than a few times, as if there was something magical and profound about this word. "Okay, I will hand myself over to my master. You wait here." Zhao Gongming memorized this word. After a while, Zhao Gongming came out hurriedly and cupped his fists respectfully to Gu Han. "My friend from the human tribe, my master invites you to come in." Hey, brother Gu Han didn't tell Zhao Gongming that he was a human tribe. How did Zhao Gongming know that? Hearing Zhao Gongming's words, Wu Gang was shocked at first, but then he became happy. He thought, Gu Han didn't lie to me. His human tribe is indeed an old friend of Tongtian Taoist Master, so Tongtian Taoist Master could recognize Gu Han's race. It seems that I have a chance to borrow the 4 immortal killing sword. Therefore, Wu Gang stood outside the Aquamarine Palace and began to wait for Gu Han to come out of the Aquamarine Palace. In ordinary people's imagination, the Aquamarine Palace of the tribe of Severity, which had tens of thousands of genuine immortals, must be extremely large, at least not inferior to the big Lei-Yin Temple and Holy Mountain. But when he walked into the Aquamarine Palace, he found that it was actually not large. There were only 4 or 5 palaces in total, and its scale was even smaller than some small temples in barren mountains. The Tongtian Palace, where Tongtian Taoist Master lived, looked like a palace of 200 to 300 square meters. 200 to 300 square meters might be enough for a home, but for the most honorable sage in the world, it was very simple. But to the most honorable sages in the world, this was extremely simple. One must know that the great thunderclap hall of Mahavarokana was more than 1,000 times bigger than this heavenly hall. At this time, in addition to Zhao Gongming, there were 3 beautiful women in the Tongtian Palace, and a fat man with big ears, a graceful face, and a shining body. This man was 70 to 80% similar to Virokana that Gu Han had seen before. However, compared with the haggard and disabled Virokana, this man was obviously much happier and more comfortable. It seemed that this guy was the first disciple of Tongtian Taoist Duobao. He was the most favored disciple of Tongtian Taoist Master, who even gave him the immortal killing sword. However, he was later valued by the Western sect and forcibly kidnapped. Instead, he became the leader of Buddhism, which was Virokana. The person sitting in the center of the palace was naturally the target that Gu Han was looking for, Tongtian Taoist Master. Unlike the ferocious face that Ju Bao had imagined, Tongtian Taoist Master looked rather kind. His long black hair flowed down to his waist like flowing light, and the 2 strands of beard at the corners of his mouth made him look very handsome. In terms of idealism, Tongtian Taoist Master did not look like a majestic sect leader at all. He looked more like an unruly swordsman. When Tongtian Taoist Master saw Gu Han, his eyes flashed, and then he asked faintly, "Are you human?" "I am," Gu Han said with a smile. The human race should not come into being yet. Tongtian Taoist master had a strange expression on his face. After becoming a sage, he had instinctively sensed the major events in the world. He knew that a new race, the human race, would be born in the future, and this race would become the main character of the world in the future. However, Tongtian Taoist master could not understand why this race, which had not come into being yet, suddenly appeared in front of him. Moreover, this guy's strength did not seem to be weaker than any of his disciples in the palace, which was a very remarkable thing. I should not be here either. I was just forced by time, Guhan said. So, you are from the future. Tongtian Taoist master's face turned serious. He also had the ability to travel through time. However, the power needed to travel through time and space varied according to the strength of the target. If Tongtian Taoist master sent an ant to the future, it would be no more than a drop in the bucket. However, if he wanted to send an existence like Guhan to the future like his disciple, even 10 Tongtian Taoist masters would not be able to do it. Thinking about it this way, in the future, the existence that could send Ji Yuhan back, just how terrifying would his strength be? More importantly, Tongtian Taoist master was also very curious about what he would become in the future. Since you are from the future, what about the Jie school? Will it be flourishing and unparalleled in the world? Tongtian Taoist master asked proudly. In his heart, the strength of the Jie school could crush the other two schools. His future must be very bright, and it was unknown whether he could become an existence like his master, ancestor Hongjun. The Jie school. Ji Yuhan suddenly revealed a sneer, and said straightforwardly, there were heavy casualties, and not even 1 out of 100 survived. In the end, there were only 2 or 3 people by sect leader's side. Nonsense. Sect leader Tongtian became furious in an instant. He slapped the chair hard, and a huge whirlwind blew through the entire palace. Even with Ji Yuhan's strength, he could not stand firm in this whirlwind. He was blown around several times in the air before falling heavily to the ground. You're right. You're right. Tongtian Taoist master is really powerful. I can't even fight back. Guhan, who got up from the ground, was a little frightened. Although he had guessed that the strength of a sage must be extremely powerful, Guhan could not fight back at all when facing a sage, his future opponent, Tongtian Taoist master. This was just a gust of wind that Tongtian Taoist master stirred up in anger. If Tongtian Taoist master attacked with all his strength, Guhan was afraid that he could not even hold on for 3 seconds. How can I defeat this guy after I leave the dreamland? Guhan thought hard. At present, Guhan could not think of any way to defeat Tongtian Taoist master. Chapter 15:12. After his anger subsided, sect leader Tongtian found that he had lost his composure, which made him lose his composure even more. It should be noted that a sage like sect leader Tongtian had experienced thousands of hardships and understood all the rules of the world before he became a sage. His Taoist heart was extremely tough, which could not be shaken by a few words. But in fact, sect leader Tongtian found that he had lost his composure to such an extent after Guhan's words. He even wanted to kill Guhan, which was absolutely impossible for sect leader Tongtian to do in the past. There was only one reason why he would lose his composure at this moment. Ji Yuhan's words had touched upon the secrets of the heavens, causing his Tao heart, which had already become one with the great Tao, to ripple. This sounded a little difficult to understand, but to put it simply, Guhan had told the truth, so sect leader Tongtian's Taoist heart involuntarily fluctuated under the influence of the Great Way. Could it be that what this guy said is true? Will our Jie school really have such a miserable future? Sect leader Tongtian's heart skipped a beat. If that was the case, he would have to think about it carefully. Well, I won't pursue your nonsense. Since you came to me today, do you want me to send you back to the future? Sect leader Tongtian asked after regaining his composure. You don't have to worry about how to return to my time and space, Great Master. I just want to borrow your treasure. I hope Great Master will allow me to do so, Guhan said. Oh, what treasure do you want to borrow from me? Sect leader Tongtian asked again. May I borrow your immortal trapping sword? Guhan asked bluntly. How dare you? Before sect leader Tongtian could answer, Zhao Gongming jumped to his feet and pointed at Guhan's head. You ignorant disciple, it's fine that you talk nonsense about the safety of our Jie school. Master doesn't want to argue with you. But you actually have the audacity to want to borrow my master's sect-guarding treasure. You're delusional. What Zhao Gongming said was exactly what the other disciples of Tongtian were thinking. They all looked at Guhan with disgust as if Guhan was an annoying stray dog. Fellow Daoist Zhao Gongming, it's the great sovereign's business whether he wants to lend me or not. What does it have to do with you? Guhan said coldly. You. Zhao Gongming still wanted to say something, but sect leader Tongtian waved his hand slightly. Zhao Gongming had no choice but to return to his seat. Sect leader Tongtian, whose immortal trapping sword was demanded, looked at Guhan expressionlessly and said, "This immortal trapping sword is the most precious treasure of the tribe of Severity and the foundation of sect leader Tongtian's attainment. There are thousands of treasures in the world, but I will never lend the 4 immortal killing swords to others. Since you're a human, I won't bicker with you if you leave now." Those who were familiar with sect leader Tongtian's character would be shocked to see this scene. This was because sect leader Tongtian was not as gentle as he appeared to be. The number of people who died in his hands because of a bad word could be piled up to the top of the heavenly court since ancient times. It would be unprecedented if sect leader Tongtian did not punish Guhan for asking for the immortal trapping sword so unreasonably. Great sovereign, this immortal trapping sword is of great use to me. It's related to whether I can return to my original space-time. I hope Great Sovereign can lend it to me. If Great Sovereign needs it, I'm willing to risk my life for it. Of course, Guhan could not leave like this. He bowed to sect leader Tongtian again and pleaded. What a joke. I'm a sage. Why would I need your help? Sect leader Tongtian said disdainfully. Sect leader Tongtian, aren't you curious about how the Tao of Severance perished in the future? How the 4 immortal killing swords were lost, how Taoist Duobao became Virokana, and how brother Zhao Gongming. Guhan glanced at Zhao Gongming and said with a smile, how did brother Zhao Gongming become the god of wealth of the heavenly court? Me. God of fortune. It was as if Zhao Gongming had heard the funniest joke in the world. He couldn't help but laugh maniacally. If Guhan had said anything else, Zhao Gongming might have believed him. However, if he said that he wanted Zhao Gongming to be the god of wealth, Zhao Gongming would really laugh himself to death. He was someone who roamed around mountains of corpses and seas of blood all day long, killing people like scything flax. How could he become some god of wealth in the future? This was simply a joke. Zhao Gongming laughed happily, but sect leader Tongtian was very worried. This was because every time Guhan said a word, sect leader Tongtian's Dao heart began to tremble crazily. That meant that what Guhan said was very likely true. That was the outcome of Jie school in the future. Therefore, today, the sect leader couldn't help but look up at the sky. Of course, sect leader Tongtian was not looking at the blue sky, but the great path hidden at the end of the universe. He wanted to see if what Guhan said was his future from the great path. The result was self-evident. Sect leader Tongtian didn't see anything. The great path was like a cloud of smoke, covering all the mysteries of the world. Don't talk too much. Even if what you said is all true, I'm in charge of my destiny. Even the great path can't control me. If there really is a tribulation like what you said in the future, I'll use the 4 immortal slaying swords to fight with all the scoundrels in front of me. There's no need for you to say more. Sect leader Tongtian said heroically. History is still like this. Hearing sect leader Tongtian's answer, Guhan couldn't help but sigh. All the sages are in awe of the great path, but only sect leader Tongtian is full of awe and also has a burning desire to resist. It's also because of the existence of this desire to resist that sect leader Tongtian tried to fight against all the sages in the future God conferment tribulation. In the end, he ended up being defeated and imprisoned. But in the end, it's also because of this desire to resist that sect leader Tongtian was finally able to counterattack and stir up the whole world. Guhan thought in his heart. The future of mankind was already doomed when sect leader Tongtian said this. Great sage, are you not willing to lend it to me in any case? Guhan said bitterly. It seemed that he had to fight with sect leader Tongtian. However, if he really fought with sect leader Tongtian, Guhan really didn't have the confidence to deal with sect leader Tongtian. But this is not the real untainted land. It's just a fictitious illusion. I shouldn't die in the hands of sect leader Tongtian. I never lend my sword to outsiders. Sect leader Tongtian stroked his beard and looked at Guhan meaningfully. But if you become my disciple and become one of my friends, I'm willing to let you study the immortal trapping sword. Sect leader Tongtian stroked his beard and looked at Guhan meaningfully. He wants to take me as his disciple again. Hearing sect leader Tongtian's words, Guhan couldn't help but smile bitterly. First, it was Taishang Larojun, then Saint Jieyin and Saint Shanti. Since Mahavirokana accepted Guhan as a disciple on behalf of Saint Jieyin and Saint Shanti, I can also be the disciple of these two existences. I have been accepted as a disciple by 3 sages. But now, sect leader Tongtian also wants to accept me as a disciple. I'm really popular. However, if I really fight with sect leader Tongtian in the future, will this be considered a scandal of a disciple killing his master? This is just an illusion. It doesn't count. It's fine as long as I can get in touch with the immortal trapping sword. Thinking of this, Guhan had an idea. He knelt on the ground and kowtowed to sect leader Tongtian. I'm willing to be your disciple as long as you're willing to lend me the immortal trapping sword. All right. Sect leader Tongtian was about to speak when Daoist Duobao, who had been silent all this while, suddenly jumped out and said, "Master, please wait. I never accept nameless people or untalented disciples. I think this friend has average talent and is not qualified to be Master's disciple. Why don't you let me try and see how capable he is?" "All right, thank you, disciple." Sect leader Tongtian nodded and closed his eyes. He didn't want to watch the show. "Friend, you just humiliated the Jie school, and now you want to be my disciple. As the chief disciple of the Jie school, I'm not willing to be associated with a despicable person like you. If you can't defeat me, leave quickly. Don't insult the Jie school." Daoist Duobao said coldly. "Do you want to fight?" Guhan frowned and looked reluctant. "Why? Are you afraid? Get lost if you're afraid." Daoist Duobao smiled coldly. "I know that you, Daoist Duobao, love refining. You even have many imitations of carnate cardinal treasures like the 4 immortal vanquishing swords. However, I don't have any weapons on me. Isn't that too disadvantageous? You should let me borrow a weapon to use." Guhan said calmly. "All right. I'll lend you my weapon." Daoist Duobao was straightforward. As soon as he finished speaking, countless Dharma treasures flew out of Daoist Duobao's Sumeru ring and floated around Ji Han. Guhan did a rough calculation. There were at least 10,000 Dharma treasures floating in the hall, and almost all of them were imitations of some treasures. Daoist Duobao might not be able to imitate all the top-notch treasures, but if it was just some ordinary treasures, not only could he imitate them exactly the same, but he could even surpass the original treasures. This fellow was indeed the strongest disciple under the sect leader Tongtian. At the same time, he was also the future Virokana. His strength was extremely high. These treasures are just one of the 10,000 treasures you have. Using one against your 10,000 treasures, I'm still at a disadvantage, Ji Han said with a face full of dissatisfaction. "Then what do you want? At most, I won't use all these treasures. We'll fight barehanded," Daoist Duobao said impatiently. "Very good." Guhan nodded. This was the effect that Guhan wanted. If Daoist Duobao really used all the treasures in his hands, Guhan would not be able to defeat him with his strength that was equivalent to that of a top-notch desolate-level Yuan Ku without the synchronized sword Maiden. "Disciple, don't fall for his trap. If you don't have your treasures, you won't be his match." The sect leader Tongtian suddenly said, "Junior, since you want a suitable weapon, I'll give it to you. This is my sword. Although it has never been unsheathed, it's still a top-notch carnate spiritual treasure. Compared to my disciple's treasure, you won't be at a disadvantage." The sect leader Tongtian gently flicked his little finger. An extremely ordinary-looking sword passed through the void and appeared in front of Guhan instantly. "Qingpin!" Guhan could not help but cry out. At that moment, what appeared in front of Guhan was the first sword Maiden in Guhan's life, the Qingpin sword. No, It should be the Qingping sword. Chapter 15:13. How is it? Is this sword satisfied? The Grandmaster of Heaven snorted coldly and looked at Guhan at the same time. Yes. Guhan would not be dissatisfied. Was there anything more suitable for him in the world than the Qingping sword? Thus, Guhan held the Qingping sword in his hand. The moment he touched the hilt of the sword, Guhan felt both familiar and unfamiliar. He was familiar because the hilt of the sword had been held in Guhan's hand every day. Naturally, Guhan was familiar with it. It was unfamiliar because Guhan could not find any traces of Qingping's existence in the sword. At that moment, the sword in Guhan's hand was just a Qingping sword. It was not Guhan's sword mother, the Qingping sword. In that case, let's make a move quickly. The Grandmaster of Heaven waved his sleeve forcefully. The moment Guhan and the Qingping sword came into contact, the Grandmaster of Heaven seemed to feel the strange feeling that Guhan had for the Qingping sword. That feeling made the Grandmaster of Heaven very uncomfortable. However, since he had already said it, the Grandmaster of Heaven naturally could not take back the Qingping sword. He could only urge the two of them to quickly start the battle. Look at my myriad treasures. The moment the battle began, Daoist Duobao was prepared to control the tens of thousands of Dharma treasures floating in the air. In this aspect, Daoist Duobao actually had a huge advantage. Or rather, this was already within Daoist Duobao's calculations. Those who had fought with Daoist Duobao knew that the only way to defeat him was to prevent Daoist Duobao from using all his treasures before he could release all his Dharma treasures. Otherwise, if Daoist Duobao really put on a stance and floated all his Dharma treasures in the air, there would be no need to fight. He could just admit defeat. No one in the world could deal with Daoist Duobao who had all his Dharma treasures. Therefore, Daoist Duobao had taken advantage of Guhan's ignorance and played a very bad idea. He used the excuse of letting Guhan choose his weapon at will to release all his Dharma treasures. At the same time, he quickly established a connection with the imprints in the Dharma treasures. That way, Daoist Duobao could mobilize the power of all the Dharma treasures. This was equivalent to holding an RPG in your hand, while your opponent had tens of thousands of rockets already aimed at the target, and only needed to press a button to fire. Kowtow and admit defeat. You're not fit to be Daoist Duobao's junior brother. Daoist Duobao revealed a sinister smile. The light emitted by tens of thousands of Dharma treasures enveloped the entire hall. Zhao Gongming, who was at the side, was shocked by the light emitted by the tens of thousands of Dharma treasures. He immediately took out his 24C calming pearls and tried his best to form a defensive barrier to protect himself. On the other hand, the three beautiful women who had been watching from the side casually took out a pair of scissors. With a gentle cut of the scissors, it was as if the entire space had been cut. None of the tens of thousands of Dharma treasures could shine on the three women. As for Guhan, his figure was immediately enveloped by the light of these Dharma treasures. He could no longer be seen. This fellow is dead. Apart from saints, no one in the world can survive under senior brother's 10,000 treasures. Zhao Gongming said mockingly. Is that so? Just as Zhao Gongming finished speaking, a voice that was as sharp as a knife rang in Zhao Gongming's ears. Zhao Gongming turned around in fright, only to discover that Jiyu Han was actually hiding behind him. Why are you here? Zhao Gongming jumped in fright. He had no idea when the other party had appeared behind him. What Zhao Gongming did not expect was that the barrier formed by the 24C calming pearls had become Guhan's protective barrier and protected Guhan. Thank you. Guhan patted Zhao Gongming's shoulder gently. At that moment, Daoist Duobao's 10,000 treasures light began to weaken. It was the best time for Guhan to attack. Guhan's body flashed in the air like a graceful swan. The eyes of the three beautiful girls lit up. In the next second, Guhan's sword pierced through the remaining treasure light of Daoist Duobao and placed the sword on Daoist Duobao's neck. You! Daoist Duobao was speechless. Zhao Gongming could not tell why Guhan had suddenly appeared behind him, but Daoist Duobao could tell. The fella in front of him had clearly grasped the laws of the void to the extreme, which was why he had used the void to hide behind Zhao Gongming the moment the treasure light had appeared and used Zhao Gongming's power to evade the treasure light. Then, He took advantage of the emptiness after a round of attacks to use his sword beam to break through all his treasure light. Finally, he placed the sword on his neck. Daoist Duobao was a little indignant about that. If Zhao Gongming had not happened to appear there, if the 24C calming pearls in Zhao Gongming's hands had not been able to block his treasure light, if he had not taken into account their relationship and not dared to direct the treasure light at Zhao Gongming, the Jiyu Han would not have survived under his treasure light. Of course, Daoist Duobao had to admit that the other party had at least reached an unprecedented peak in terms of the laws of the void and the laws of the sword. Otherwise, even if his treasure light had weakened, the other party would not have been able to break through all his treasure light with one sword. Therefore, Daoist Duobao admitted that he was not as good as Guhan in these two aspects. Well, Guhan won this battle. You can step back, disciple. Sect Master Tongtian, who was sitting high above, said lightly. Daoist Duobao took the opportunity to retreat and obediently retreated. Disciple Guhan, follow me to the back. Hearing that Sect Master Tongtian had changed the way he addressed him, Guhan naturally followed him obediently and entered the backyard of the Tongtian Palace with him. The back of the Tongtian Palace looked ordinary, except for a huge stone that was extremely conspicuous. Guhan also recognized the stone's origin immediately. Treasure-snatching rock. Guhan said in surprise. You actually recognize this stone? Sect Master Tongtian was also a little startled by Guhan. He had not expected that Guhan would be able to recognize the stone's origin. After all, this treasure-snatching rock had an extraordinary origin. When Sect Master Tongtian's master, ancestor Hongjun, had become a sage, he had placed all kinds of primordial treasures that he had collected for most of his life on this treasure-snatching rock. He had allowed his disciples to take their own opportunities. Therefore, the three Pure Ones and Lady Nuwo had divided up all the treasures on the rock. But then sect leader Tongtian had a brainwave. He suddenly felt that the treasure-snatching rock might also be a treasure. Taking advantage of the fact that everyone had left, he turned around and put the rock into his pocket. He then placed it in his backyard. Even Sect Master Tongtian's closest disciple, Taoist Duobao, did not know the origin of this stone. They simply thought that it was an ordinary stone. Because it was good-looking and had spirituality, their master had placed it in his backyard as a decoration. How could they have known that this thing had such an origin? Therefore, in the entire untainted land, apart from ancestor Hongjun, Sect Master Tongtian thought that only his three senior brothers and sisters knew the origin of this stone. However, he had never expected that Guhan would know about this stone. Disciple, you don't look like you're from the future. Even the people in the past don't know about this stone of mine. You're just a human from the future. How could you possibly know the origin of this stone of mine? Sect leader Tongtian said cautiously. It's because I'm from the future that I know the origin of this stone. Guhan smiled and said, I was fortunate enough to obtain a short memory of the guide sage. In this memory, I happened to see the appearance of this treasure-snatching rock. You have something to do with the guide sage? Sect Master Tongtian was shocked again. No, the guide sage looks quiet, but he is the most cautious and shrewd guy among the six of us. How could his memory be handed over to you so casually? What happened in the future? Of course, the guide sage couldn't hand over this memory to me. But the dead guide sage could. Guhan let out a long sigh and said, the future experienced a great tribulation and the guide sage died. I just inherited some of the sage's unfulfilled wishes and wanted to save the entire future world. The guide sage died. Sect Master Tongtian was really shocked this time. It should be known that ever since he became a sage, Sect Master Tongtian had always thought that he was immortal. Unless the whole world was destroyed, he would never die. But now he heard the news of the guide sage's death from Guhan's mouth. But now, he heard the news of the Jieyin saint's death from Jiyu Han's mouth. If the Jieyin saint could die, then wouldn't he be killed as well? This made Tongtian inexplicably worried. He hadn't realized his ambition, so he didn't want to die. Yes. Guhan nodded. How did he die? Sect Master Tongtian could not wait to ask again. You killed him. Guhan's words stunned Sect Master Tongtian for the fourth time today. You said I killed. Sect Master Tongtian stuttered. At this time, he had never thought that he would kill the guide sage with his own hands, or rather, he had never thought that he had the strength to kill a sage. How did I kill the guide sage? Sect Master Tongtian's blood began to boil. He could not wait to know how to kill the guide sage. Master, do you really want to know? Guhan took a deep look at Sect Master Tongtian and said, Master, it's not that I don't want to tell you. If you know and I tell you more, I'm afraid you and I won't be able to escape the blame of the great Tao. Sect Master Tongtian was silent for a long time. Finally, he nodded helplessly and said, But you're right. I've fallen into a demonic barrier. This is indeed not something I should know now. Chapter 15:14. Disciple, it's not that I don't want to give you the 4 immortal slaying swords, but you need to get their consent. Now I've put them in the treasure-snatching rock. Put your hands on the rock and try your best to communicate with the 4 immortal slaying sword. If you are fated to meet them, they will show up and meet you. If not, I can't help you. Sect leader Tongtian said while pinching his beard. His words made Guhan curse him in his heart. Sect leader Tongtian was simply deceiving him. He had been in contact with the 4 immortal slaying swords for a long time and knew them very well. The 4 immortal slaying swords did not have such a picky character. What about meeting the fated ones? At least for the immortal extinguishing sword, even if it was an ordinary person, she would immediately jump out and chat with him until the sun and moon blurred. Obviously, sect leader Tongtian was not willing to give the 4 immortal slaying swords to him. Ji Han knew that he did not have the ability to go against sect leader Tongtian, so he could only obediently put his hands on the treasure-snatching rock. At the same time, the fragments of consciousness in his body directly entered the rock. He found that the rock contained countless treasures. These treasures were probably the collection of sect leader Tongtian for most of his life. There were more than the tens of thousands of treasures imitated by Taoist plentiful treasures. Ji Han was amazed. Of course, Ji Han was not interested in these treasures. His consciousness fragments began to search through the tens of thousands of treasures. Finally, he found the 4 immortal killing swords suspended in the deepest part of the treasure-snatching rock. Probably because the 4 immortal slaying swords were the most precious treasures, they were placed in the innermost position. But what surprised Guhan was that there was a small writing brush floating in the center of the 4 immortal slaying swords. If the things in the innermost position were more precious, didn't that mean that the value of the writing brush surpassed that of the 4 immortal slaying swords? However, in the memory of the sage relic that Guhan had obtained, there were no more than 3 treasures in the untainted land that were more precious than the 4 immortal slaying swords. And none of these treasures was in the shape of the writing brush. Forget it. This is just an illusion. Why should I care so much? Guhan quickly put down the writing brush. At the same time, he took out his usual means of communication with the 4 immortal killing swords, hoping that they would follow him out of the treasure-snatching rock. However, Guhan had forgotten that these were not the 4 immortal executing swords that he had created as a sword maiden, but the real 4 immortal executing swords. How could they care about Guhan's thoughts? Therefore, they simply floated in place without moving, completely ignoring the attentive Guhan. Oh, I forgot that you're not my people yet. Guhan felt bitter. The 4 immortal killing swords had turned their backs on him. What should he do now? He could not directly enter the treasure-snatching rock and take out the 4 immortal killing swords. Just as Guhan was at his wit's end, a fragment of consciousness that was floating randomly suddenly seemed to be attracted by a kind of vortex. Guhan could not control it and it was directly sucked into the immortal eliminating sword of the 4 immortal killing swords. Following the entry of the fragment of consciousness, the originally motionless celestial extinguished sword suddenly began to tremble slightly. At the same time, Ji Han could feel that a faint connection had been formed between him and the celestial extinguished sword. Immortal eliminating sword. Come. Guhan's thoughts stirred. The immortal eliminating sword, which was floating in place, really moved according to Guhan's thoughts to the location of Guhan's main consciousness. So that's how it is. It's enough to let my consciousness fragment enter the 4 immortal killing sword. Guhan suddenly understood. He immediately separated 3 consciousness fragments and secretly sent them into the immortal killing sword, the immortal trapping sword, and the immortal slaying sword. Soon, the 4 swords began to move according to Guhan's thoughts in the treasure-snatching rock. Although Guhan very much wanted to inject more consciousness fragments into the 4 immortal killing swords, Guhan clearly knew that the 4 immortal killing swords were the treasures of sect leader Tongtian. If he sneaked into the 4 immortal killing swords, sect leader Tongtian might not find out. But if he sent too many, it would be inevitable that sect leader Tongtian would notice. Moreover, this was only a dreamland. No matter how many consciousness fragments he sent in, it would not make much sense. Fortunately, Guhan only sent in 1. He then controlled the 4 immortal killing swords to slowly move out of the treasure-snatching rock and finally appeared in front of sect leader Tongtian. "You're very smart. You're indeed my good disciple." Sect leader Tongtian did not expect that his 4 immortal killing swords would really come out. But he had no choice but to glare fiercely at Guhan. After all, the most important thing for a sage was his pride, apart from his own strength. Sect leader Tongtian could not do such a treacherous thing, let alone do something that would hurt his disciple. Therefore, out of sight, out of mind, he went straight to the back room to meditate and comprehend the mystery. But before he left, sect leader Tongtian left a message to Guhan. Guhan's use of the 4 immortal killing swords would end in 5 days. After 5 days, regardless of whether Guhan achieved his goal or not, the 4 immortal killing swords must return to sect leader Tongtian. Being able to use the 4 immortal killing swords for 5 days, Guhan was already very satisfied. Moreover, Guhan's real goal was only the immortal trapping sword. Therefore, Guhan could not wait to hold the hilt of the immortal trapping sword with his right hand. An indescribable spiritual pleasure filled Guhan's whole body. It was like an orgasm, so pleasant that it was hard to forget. "Master." The immortal trapping sword's voice rang in Guhan's ears again, waking Guhan up from this comfortable feeling. "How is it? Do you know what I should do next to pass the 9 states competition?" Guhan immediately asked the immortal trapping sword. Guhan remembered that the immortal trapping sword had said that as long as he held the hilt of the original body, it would know what he should do next. The immortal trapping sword's voice hesitated for a while, and finally said with a slightly bitter smile, "Sorry, Master. I still don't know what to do now." Hearing the immortal trapping sword's answer, what else could Guhan say? It seemed like he could only continue to study in this world. "But Master, the immortal trapping sword probably knows why this happened." The immortal trapping sword sighed slightly and said, "Master, don't forget that you synchronized with Sister Shenyuan's sword this time. By the way, how could I forget about Shenyuan's sword?" Hearing the immortal trapping sword's words, Guhan instantly had a feeling of enlightenment. That's right, the synchronization this time was actually synchronized with the immortal trapping sword and Shenyuan's sword. However, as soon as he entered the illusion, the immortal trapping sword immediately communicated with him. On the contrary, Shenyuan's sword, who had always been talkative and had an ambiguous relationship with Guhan, had not made a sound since entering the illusion. If it had not been for the immortal trapping sword's sudden reminder, Guhan would have really forgotten about it. No. This world is really strange. I even remember some of the information about the rat-level Yuan Ku clearly. How could I suddenly forget about the Shenyuan sword? At the same time, Bu Han was worried. The fact that Guhan had actually forgotten about the Shenyuan sword was an extremely strange phenomenon in itself. It seems like the key to the problem lies with the Shenyuan sword, Guhan said thoughtfully. Since the Shenyuan sword doesn't say anything, I'll take the initiative to look for her. When I find her, maybe I can find a way to leave this illusion. 5 days was not a long time. Including the time spent on the journey, the time that Guhan really spent on handling affairs might not even add up to 1 day. Therefore, Guhan immediately left the Azure Palace without stopping. He did not even take the most basic step of saying goodbye to his master. As if it was because of sect leader Tongtian's order, no one in the Azure Palace stopped Guhan. Guhan left the Azure Palace very easily and saw Wu Gang, who was still waiting anxiously outside. "Brother Guhan, have you borrowed the 4 immortal killing swords?" Seeing Guhan, Wu Gang immediately asked eagerly. Here they are. Gu Han patted the 4 swords hanging on his waist. Wu Gang immediately showed an extremely happy expression. Without saying a word, he immediately pulled Gu Han to the direction of the laurel tree. As far as Gu Han knew, the Shenyuan sword was forged by human Emperor Fuxi. At this time, human Emperor Fuxi was living on the builder tree with his sister goddess Enviwa. The laurel tree was next to the builder tree. It was not far from where Gu Han first came to this world, so Gu Han did not reject Wu Gang. Instead, he let Wu Gang pull him to go in the direction where they came from. When Gu Han completely left the Azure Palace, sect leader Tongtian, who had originally entered the back hall to meditate, came out of the room again. He looked at his treasure-snatching rock with a strange expression. He could not understand why the 4 immortal killing swords, which he had hidden so well, suddenly got along with Gu Han and ran away directly. Open. The more sect leader Tongtian thought about it, the angrier he became. He directly slapped the treasure-snatching rock. As a result, something unexpected happened. Under sect leader Tongtian's slap, the treasure-snatching rock directly broke into pieces. Tens of thousands of treasures stored inside fell out, almost drowning sect leader Tongtian. T. This was the 5th time that sect leader Tongtian was stunned today. What was the treasure-snatching rock? It was a divine object that sect leader Tongtian used to store all his treasures. It used to be the treasure of Hongjun ancestor. It was not an exaggeration to say that it was the hardest stone in the world. Sect leader Tongtian often slapped this stone, but no matter how much strength he exerted, the treasure-snatching rock never moved. It was estimated that even if sect leader Tongtian used all his strength, he would not be able to damage it. But now, sect leader Tongtian slapped it to vent his anger, and the treasure-snatching rock unexpectedly broke into pieces. I'm afraid today. After the initial shock, sect leader Tongtian felt a sense of foreboding. Everything that had happened today had caught sect leader Tongtian unprepared. It was even more wonderful than what he had experienced in the past 10,000 years. After sighing with emotion, sect leader Tongtian had to pick up the treasures scattered around. Although there were many treasures, they were collected by sect leader Tongtian one by one. Sect leader Tongtian remembered the origin of each treasure clearly. Every time he picked up a treasure, sect leader Tongtian would have an interesting memory, which made sect leader Tongtian feel much better. When sect leader Tongtian was finally done, there was only a writing brush left on the ground. Sect leader Tongtian could not help but feel strange. There was no memory of this writing brush. Even sect leader Tongtian himself did not know when it had entered the treasure-snatching rock. Chapter 15:15. Brother Jiyu Han, I'll have to trouble you to chop here, please, Wu Gang said excitedly as he pointed at the laurel tree in front of him. Gu Han frowned when he saw where Wu Gang was pointing at. According to Wu Gang's previous words, he only needed to use the branches of the laurel tree to make arrows. But now, Wu Gang dipped his finger into the trunk of the laurel tree. Obviously, Wu Gang hoped that Gu Han could chop down the entire laurel tree. Do I need to use a whole laurel tree to make 10 arrows? Jiyu Han didn't chop it down like Wu Gang expected. Instead, he asked straightforwardly. Of course not. But my archery skills are not as good as Hu Yi's. I think I need hundreds or even thousands of arrows to shoot down a golden crow. Anyway, I plan to make the whole laurel tree into arrows, so it's better to be prepared, Wu Gang said. You are too greedy. Gu Han frowned even more. According to the memory obtained from the sage's relic, the laurel tree was also a spiritual plant between heaven and earth. Just like Zhen Yuanzi's ginseng fruit tree and the Fusang tree where the golden crow lived, they were all precious treasures between heaven and earth. Wu Gang actually wanted to chop down the whole laurel tree just for his own selfishness. Although this was an illusion and had no effect on reality, Gu Han didn't want to satisfy Wu Gang's insatiable greed. 1 branch is enough for you to make 100 arrows. The rest is for the laurel tree to continue living here. Gu Han held the immortal trapping sword and chopped at a relatively thick branch. Sure enough, as Taishang Laojun had said, the immortal trapping sword easily chopped down the branch that Wu Gang couldn't cut. Then, he handed it to Wu Gang and said, 100 arrows? That's not enough. My archery skills are too bad. I'm afraid I can't even shoot down a feather with 100 arrows. Wu Gang looked at the laurel branch in his hand and said to Guhan discontentedly. Then you should practice with normal arrows for now. When you have Hu Yi's abilities, you can go and shoot the golden crows. Anyway, Hu Yi doesn't have your laurel arrow, so you don't have to worry about Hu Yi getting ahead of you. After saying that, Guhan ignored Wu Gang and walked toward the world tree. Damn it. Hu Yi is born with a special talent. No matter how I practice, I can't reach his level in archery. This is impossible. Looking at the back of Guhan, Wu Gang gritted his teeth and said. He couldn't help but resent Guhan in his heart. By the way, this guy only helped me cut down the branch, but he didn't divide it into 100 pieces of wood the size of arrows. Without the immortal trapping sword, I still can't make laurel arrows. I still have to ask him to make arrows for me. Wu Gang suddenly thought of this, but at this time, Wu Gang had already developed a resentment towards Ji Yu Han. If Wu Gang wanted to ask for Ji Yu Han again, Wu Gang's heart was 100 times unwilling. In this way, Wu Gang suddenly had an evil idea. His idea was very simple. The key to the matter was the immortal trapping sword. As long as he could kill Guhan, he could get the immortal trapping sword. In this way, whether he was making arrows or cutting down the laurel tree, he could do whatever he wanted. He didn't need to care about Guhan at all. Wu people always did what they thought of. This was also fully reflected in Wu Gang. Therefore, Wu Gang didn't think about how Guhan could get the immortal trapping sword from the powerful sect leader Tongtian. He didn't think about how strong Bi Yu Han was. He just waved his big axe and slashed at Guhan's back. Wu Gang's axe was extremely fast and powerful. Coupled with Wu Gang's Heaven Wizard level strength, if the axe were to be used on an ordinary sword wielder, they would probably die on the spot. But who was Guhan? How could he be attacked by such a clumsy guy like Wu Gang? Wu Gang's axe also completely ruined the little good impression he had in Guhan's heart. Guhan didn't even turn his head. He directly threw a sword light at Wu Gang's head. Wu Gang's eyes widened in an instant, and a stream of blood mixed with brain matter gushed out from his head. Then, he fell to the ground and turned into a drop of Zhu Wu's blood, returning to the blood pool of Zhu Wu in the nearby Qiangliang tribe. It was reasonable to say that when Wu Gang's body died, his soul should dissipate completely. But at this moment, a lustrous light suddenly shot out from the laurel tree and enveloped Wu Gang's somewhat dazed soul. In the end, the entire soul was absorbed into his body, and he returned to his original appearance. A few days later, Hu Yi suddenly came to Wu Gang's house and wanted to discuss with Wu Gang how to kill Jinwu. At this time, Wu Gang's house was empty. Finally, Hu Yi came to the laurel tree and found Wu Gang's axe beside the laurel tree. He casually threw it on the branch of the laurel tree and smelled Wu Gang's blood. Only then did he know that his good brother Wu Gang had died. Good brother, I, Hu Yi, swear to God that I will find the murderer and avenge you. I will use my arrow to pierce the murderer's throat, Hu Yi shouted angrily. Then, he ran back and told Chang Yi about the matter. Afterward, he resolutely said that if he didn't kill Jinwu, he wouldn't marry Chang Yi. Later, Hu Yi buried Wu Gang's axe under the laurel tree. Then, with the help of the Taishang Laro Jun, he made 10 laurel arrows from the laurel tree branch and killed 10 Jinwu that were flying in the sky. At the same time, he won Wu Gang's heart and opened the prelude to the Great Witch and Demon War. Many years after the Great Witch and Demon War ended, Wu Gang's soul was reborn by the laurel tree. Then, it even gave Wu Gang a new body and released him. However, don't think that this was the laurel tree repaying evil with good. On the contrary, this was the laurel tree's most vicious revenge against Wu Gang, who wanted to completely cut off its soul. The laurel tree left a restriction on Wu Gang's soul. This restriction forbade Wu Gang from leaving a distance of 50 meters from the laurel tree. Otherwise, Wu Gang's soul would immediately scatter and he would die. If Wu Gang wanted to remove this restriction, he had to find a way to cut off the laurel tree. As long as the laurel tree was cut, the restriction set by the laurel tree would naturally disappear. Therefore, in order to regain his freedom, Wu Gang could only hold an axe and continuously cut the laurel tree. However, no matter how deep the wound was, the laurel tree would slowly recover. Wu Gang was trapped around the laurel tree for his entire life, becoming a pitiful joke in the mouths of all immortals and mortals. Back to the main topic, after Guhan killed Wu Gang, he immediately flew in the direction of the builder tree. Only when he was next to the roots of the builder tree did Guhan deeply understand how huge the builder tree was. Just the thickness of the trunk of the builder tree was the size of the entire Yuzhang city. Yes, that's right. The area of the trunk of the builder tree was the area of the entire Yuzhang city, or even larger. From this, one could imagine how terrifying the builder tree was. Not only was the builder tree thick, but it was also very tall. It was said that it reached the southern heavenly gate of the demon race's heavenly court, which was equivalent to being as tall as the sky. It was obviously a very time-consuming task to find the location of Nuer and Fushi in such a huge tree. Fortunately, Guhan had the memory of the sage relic, so he knew that Nuer and Fushi lived on the top of the builder tree. After all, the sage Jie Yin often interacted with Nuer and Fushi, so he naturally knew about the news of these two. After flying all the way up for about 100 kilometers, Guhan finally saw the top of the builder tree. At the same time, he also found a pure carpentry shop built on the trunk and branches of the builder tree. There was a plaque with the words Imperial Palace of Nuer written on it. However, next to this plaque, there was another plaque with the words Imperial Palace of Shi written on it. Obviously, the siblings Nuer and Fushi lived here. Those who come from afar are guests. Friend, please come in. Before he knocked on the door, Guhan heard a voice coming from inside the Imperial Palace of Nuer. Guhan knew that his existence could not be hidden from the two god-level existences, Nuer and Fushi. Since they had already invited him, of course, Guhan could not shrink back, so he simply swaggered in. After walking into the Imperial Palace of Nuer, Guhan found that the Imperial Palace of Nuer was not as simple as it looked from the outside. On the contrary, the interior was extremely luxurious and full of all kinds of exquisite ornaments. It seemed that our female old ancestor Nuer was not as noble and holy as described in the legends, who did not care about ordinary things. After all, women were women, and their natural love for beauty could not be changed. At the same time, Guhan finally saw Goddess Nuer and old ancestor Fushi. The two of them, one dressed in red and the other in white, sat side by side on a chair. If he did not know that they were brother and sister, Guhan would have thought that he saw a pair of intimate lovers. But then again, the sage relic also had a lot of memories of gossip, and the biggest gossip was that although Nuer and Fushi were brother and sister, they were also a pair of lovers. This was a forbidden love between brother and sister. Well, these two were human ancestors after all, so it was better for Guhan to give up on these thoughts of gossip. Chapter 15-16. Fellow Daoist, do you know that my brother and I are at a critical juncture and didn't want to meet any guests? However, my brother insisted on meeting you, so I let you in. Do you know why? Goddess Nuer said arrogantly as soon as they met. It was as if she was giving Guhan a lot of face by being willing to meet Guhan. If it was any other human, after meeting the ancestor of all humans, Goddess Nuer, they would not feel that there was anything wrong with Goddess Nuer's arrogant attitude. To put it simply, Goddess Nuer was equivalent to everyone's mother. Unless one was an unfilial son, everyone would treat their mother with respect. Unfortunately, Jiyu Han wasn't an ordinary human. Of course, he wasn't an unfilial son either. Thus, facing Goddess Nuer's arrogance, Jiyu Han's expression didn't change at all. He only said indifferently, "But I was the one who stopped Wu Gang from cutting down the entire moon laurel tree. That's why Fushi ancestor thinks highly of me." Goddess Nuer choked on Guhan's words. She thought that Guhan would say something like he was the disciple of sect leader Tongtian so that she could mock him. But in the end, the other party immediately saw through the real reason. This caused Lady Nuo to choke on her words and be unable to say them. "I told you that you can't beat disciple-nephew Guhan. He defeated disciple-nephew Duobao, made senior brother Tongtian take the initiative to accept him as his disciple, and even lent him the 4 immortal slaying swords that he cherished his life. Disciple-nephew Guhan is not someone who can be teased so easily. Sister Nuer, you think too much." Patriarch Fushi said bitterly. Brother, you. Goddess Nua revealed a shy face. This pair of brother and sister can go to the orthopedics department in Germany. However, Fuxi's words also revealed an extremely important piece of information. Fuxi already knew that Guhan had been accepted as a disciple of sect leader Tongtian and had also lent the 4 immortal slaying swords to Guhan. From the looks of it, sect leader Tongtian had at least told this news to all his fellow disciples. Otherwise, there was no reason for sect leader Tongtian to tell Fuxi and Nush alone. Martial nephew Guhan, what business do you have with us? For the sake of senior Tongtian, as long as I can help you, I'm willing to help you. Fuxi said to Guhan with a kind smile. It seemed that the identity of Tongtian's disciple was not small, it was enough for Fuxi to make such a promise. In fact, what Guhan did not know was that the identity of Tongtian's disciple was only useful in front of Fuxi, because most of Tongtian's other disciples had already become sages. Between Nua and Fuxi, who had yet to become a saint, Nua had already known the secrets of heaven and knew that she was destined to become a saint. In other words, although Fuxi had spent the most time on the road to becoming a saint, he was also the most miserable one. In the end, he did not get any promise and could only maintain his current situation. This was also the reason why Fuxi could not afford to put on airs in front of Guhan. At the same time, he hoped to do sect leader Tongtian a favor and get sect leader Tongtian's help in the future. Of course, when Fuxi made the promise, he used the word I instead of we. This meant that Fuxi's promise had excluded Nua. It was impossible for Guhan to get Nua's help because of this promise. However, whether he could get Nua's help or not, Guhan did not care. It was enough as long as Fuxi was willing to help him. I want to get a sword. Guhan stated his purpose very straightforwardly. A sword. Fuxi was surprised. Martial nephew, haven't you already obtained senior Tongtian's 4 immortal slaying swords? In this world, there is no existence that can surpass these 4 swords. Why do you come to me for a sword? Because only you, martial uncle Fuxi, can forge this sword. Guhan said. Only I can forge a sword? Fuxi fell into silence. After a long time, he asked in a daze, what sword? Only I can forge a sword. A sword of humanity, Guhan said with emotion. Sword of humanity? What does that mean? What kind of sword is it? What kind of Tao is humanity? Can you tell me? Fuxi asked doubtfully. Humanity is the Tao of the world, the Tao of our human clan, the Tao of the untainted world and even the Tao of the thousands of dimensional worlds. As long as we have humanity, even if we become enemies with sages, we won't regret it. Guhan said passionately. Half of what he said was true, but the other half was boasting. If one could really conquer the thousands of dimensional worlds, then human beings would not have suffered from the great apocalypse and almost perished. The reason why Guhan said such big words was to arouse Fuxi's emotions. After all, Fuxi was the future human emperor, the legendary heavenly emperor. The word human and Fuxi were inseparable, so Guhan believed that Fuxi would definitely be attracted by his words. Sure enough, when Fuxi heard Guhan's words, he immediately became extremely excited. Like a spring, he stood up from the chair, giving Enviwa a fright. This was the first time Enviwa saw her brother reveal such an excited expression. So this is called humanity. This is my Tao. This is the Tao that I have been searching for. Fuxi was so excited that tears flowed down from his eyes. All along, Fuxi had been in a state of extreme sorrow because he could not see the path ahead clearly. However, Fuxi had a vague feeling that there was a Tao in this world specially prepared for him. As long as he could grasp this Tao, he could break through the darkness in front of him and reach a whole new realm. However, after so many years, Fuxi had not even heard of the name of this Tao, let alone found this Tao. At this moment, when Guhan said the name of humanity, Fuxi felt like he had caught a silk ball that was thrown down from the sky. He finally found what he had been searching for. How can I understand this Tao? Fuxi did not care about the status between uncle master and disciple nephew. He rushed to Guhan and held Guhan's hands excitedly. The Tao is the Tao of the human race. The human race has not been born yet. Currently, there is only me, the future, so Uncle Master Fushi's pursuit of the Tao is just an illusion. When the human race is born, it will be a piece of cake for Uncle Master Fushi. Guhan smiled. The human race has not been born yet. Then how will the human race be born? Fushi took a few steps back in panic. The thing that he had been pursuing in his dreams was right in front of him, but he still could not grasp it. This feeling made Fushi very uncomfortable. However, before the human race is born, Uncle Master can do something in advance. Guhan changed the topic. What is it? Fushi asked immediately. Forge a sword. Guhan smiled. Forge a sword of humanity, forge a sword of the human sovereign, and the one who will be the real human sovereign. I'm afraid this sword is not the sword that you want. Old ancestor Fushi was not stupid. Combined with the reason that Guhan came to ask for the sword, he immediately realized that this sword was probably the real reason why Guhan came to find him. Yes, this is indeed the reason why I came to find Uncle Master Fushi. Guhan nodded. However, Uncle Master Fushi, please rest assured that I do not covet this sword. Because in Marshal Nephew's era, this sword was Marshal Nephew's sword. If Marshal Nephew wants to return to his own world, he will have to come into contact with this sword again. This is really a strange feeling. Someone actually obtained a sword that I haven't even forged before. It's really interesting. Fushi suddenly laughed. According to what you said, in your era, aren't you the sovereign of all humans? I wasn't when I came here, but I should be when I go back. Guhan nodded. Alright, since I am the first human sovereign of the human race, I will help you, the future human sovereign, so that I will not let down my juniors. For the first time in millions of years, Fushi revealed a genuinely happy smile. He patted Jiyu Han on the shoulder and said, "Come with me, Uncle Master will bring you to see Uncle Master's sword house." This is the first time Uncle Master has brought anyone other than Sister Nush in there. Brother, this guy is really too proud. He doesn't even know if this guy is telling the truth or not. He is really reckless. Looking at the backs of her brother and Guhan, Goddess Nua smiled helplessly and muttered to herself. However, Nua could completely understand her brother's reaction at this time. Fushi had been suppressed by the unclear future for far too long, so even a weak ray of light would not be able to stop him. Even a weak ray of light, which could not be distinguished from the outside world or from the end of the road, could make her brother completely lose his composure and fall into a state of madness. This guy should be telling the truth, if he was really a human. In fact, when hearing the name of the human race, not only did Fushi fall into a state of ecstasy, even Goddess Nua's heart was completely stirred. Among the 6 sages appointed by Hongjun ancestor, 5 of them had already become sages. Only she, Nua, had not made a move yet. She was already millions of years behind the other senior and junior brothers. Unlike Fushi, who could not see the light, Nua knew where the light was for her. Goddess Enviwa had a vague feeling that if she wanted to become a sage, she had to follow the will of the heavenly Tao and create a race that could dominate the future. With the kindness and offerings of this race, Goddess Enviwa would be able to become a sage in an instant and become a sage by virtue of merits. However, what Nua could not figure out was what kind of race she should create in order to become the protagonist of the future in the eyes of the heavenly Tao. It was not until the moment she saw Guhan that Nua realized that she might have found that opportunity. I want to create humans. Nua swung her snake tail and said to herself excitedly, just nice, the real human race has delivered itself to me. I already know what the human race should look like. Chapter 15-17. This is my sword house. You are also the first outsider to enter this place. Apart from Sister Nua, no one else in the great wilderness knew that I had this hobby. Fushi pointed at the house in front of him and spoke with a rather pleased tone. Rather than saying that a house had appeared in front of Guhan, it would be better to say that it was a huge hall. Fushi had actually hollowed out a branch of the world tree, which was now filled with long swords. A rough estimate showed that there were probably over 10,000 swords placed in this hall. This sword. Guhan's eyes swept across the entire sword house and he discovered that one of the swords looked somewhat familiar. When he walked in, he was stunned to discover that this sword looked exactly like the Heaven-reliant sword. However, this was only a simple similarity in appearance. With a single glance, Guhan could tell that the material of this sword was fundamentally different from his own heaven-reliant sword. The material used to forge this sword was probably an extremely rare material in the Great Wilderness. If the heaven-reliant sword was truly forged from such a material, then it would at the very least be a spirit sword, not a treasure sword. This is a sword that I forged 3,600 years ago. Do you like it? Fushi asked with a smile when he saw that Guhan had focused his attention on this heaven-reliant sword. No. This sword is just somewhat similar to a sword I've seen before. Guhan replied indifferently. Is that so? Fushi's face did not show any signs of shock. Instead, he said in a matter-of-fact manner, every sword here took me at least 10 years to forge. This entire house of swords took me no less than 1,000,000 years to forge. Every sword here was forged by me with all my heart. I remember the forging process of each sword clearly. When I forged them, I remember the thoughts I had, the designs I made, and the changes I made. I remember all of them. Not a single sword is an exception. Fushi's words were spoken very calmly, but when Guhan heard them, he could not help but feel admiration. This Fushi absolutely loved swords to the bone. That's why I said that every sword here is different. They are unique existences, and none of them are the same. They all have different shapes and materials. There are a total of 13,628 swords here, and I've used up almost all of my designs and ideas regarding swords. To put it bluntly, it would be very difficult for me to forge a sword that is completely different from the swords here, because this place already contains all the swords I can imagine. After listening to Fushi's words, Guhan could not think of any other words except admiration. Fushi was probably the one who loved swords the most in the untainted world. As for sect leader Tongtian, he probably loved the power represented by the 4 immortal killing swords more. You want to forge a human sovereign's sword that belongs to the human clan. That's good. I like it very much. That's why I'm willing to bring you here. My inspiration is almost exhausted now. If you can bring me new ideas, I won't blame you even if you're lying to me, Fushi said with a smile. I won't lie to you, because I need that sword to leave here. Guhan said sincerely. Okay, I'm willing to believe you. Now can you tell me how I can forge the human sovereign's sword that you mentioned? Fushi asked expectantly. Please wait a moment. Guhan nodded, then took out a long sword from the wall and began to draw on the ground. After a while, a Shenyuan sword was drawn on the ground of the sword house. Guhan did not have any talent in painting, so he could not draw the temperament, art, and connotation that those experts and artists pursued. The only characteristic of Guhan's painting was that it was real. It looked almost exactly the same as the real Shenyuan sword. There was no other difference. Good sword. At the moment when the Shenyuan sword was drawn, Fushi could not help but blurt out. This was indeed the best sword he had ever seen. Fushi said with great emotion, I can't believe that someone can actually draw the heaven, earth, mountains, rivers, all living things, grains, and even the truth of the whole world on the blade of a sword. It's beyond my imagination. My thoughts are all on myself, and I never care about mountains, rivers, and all living things. I haven't reached the realm of this sword yet. Quickly tell me, who was the one who forged this sword? Fushi suddenly grabbed Jiyu Han's shoulder with both hands and said in an excited voice. According to our human legend, this sword is called the Shenyuan sword. It was also forged by a person named Gongsun Shenyuan. He is actually your successor, the third human emperor of the human race. However, there are also legends that this Shenyuan sword was actually given to Gongsun Shenyuan by you. No. This sword is definitely not something I can give him. I may be able to forge this sword, but I can't carve the mountains, rivers, and all living things on this sword. This can only be done by a person who has the world in his heart. I haven't reached this realm yet, Fushi said sincerely. In that case, let's not care about this painting for now. Let's forge the sword first. Guhan could not help but frown. However, it was obviously impossible to find Gongsun Shenyuan at this time, so he could only forge the Shenyuan sword first. Sure. Fushi nodded, then turned to Guhan and said, Give it to me. What do I have to give you? Guhan asked curiously. Of course it's the forging formula of this sword. Fushi smiled bitterly. I can provide the materials, but you have to at least tell me what materials are used to forge this sword. I don't know. Guhan shook his head and said straightforwardly, I'm afraid that even Gongsun Shenyuan himself doesn't know what materials are used to forge the Shenyuan sword. How could I know? Then there's no other way. As the saying goes, a slight difference can lead to a great loss. As long as one of the materials is different, it won't be the Shenyuan sword that you want. You won't be able to find your way home with this sword, Fushi said with a sigh. I don't need any materials or formulas. Guhan looked at the bulging muscles on Fushi's shoulders, looked at the tens of thousands of different swords around him, and looked at Fushi's infatuated expression. Suddenly, Guhan understood something. No matter what, this sword is the Shenyuan sword. Guhan said firmly. Really? I understand, then I'll do it directly. After hearing Guhan's words, Fushi also understood at this moment. He no longer asked for the formula of the Shenyuan sword from Guhan. Instead, he began to busy himself in the entire sword house. Soon, he took out countless materials and threw them all into the sword furnace. Starlight iron, pre-celestial carbon, Pangu's remains. Fushi had thrown no less than 1,000 materials into the sword furnace, and Ji Han could only find about 100 materials in the saint's relic that corresponded to his memories. However, every single one of these materials was extremely precious, and even a saint would be tempted by them. So many rare materials were thrown into the sword furnace by Fushi, as if they were completely worthless. Fire, come. Immediately, a black flame was thrown into the sword furnace by Fushi. The entire sword furnace was quickly enveloped by the black flame, losing all light as if it had become a black hole. The great destructive flame. Seeing this flame, Guhan was also shocked. According to the memory in the sage relics, the great destructive flame was a flame that existed before Pangu created the world. It was a flame that used the world as its fuel. This kind of flame had almost been extinguished when Pangu created the world. Unexpectedly, Fushi still had such a flame in his hand. Next, Fushi stood in front of the sword furnace, as if he was controlling the operation of the sword furnace that had fallen into the black hole. At this point, Guhan couldn't help at all. He just stood quietly beside Fushi and observed. He stood there for a full 3 days and 3 nights. When Fushi's body was about to be swallowed by the black hole, Fushi, who had been silent all this time, suddenly said, "Give me a sword." A sword. Guhan was stunned, but he immediately reacted. He took out a sword that Fushi had forged and asked Fushi, "Is it this sword?" "That's right, throw it in." After Fushi finished speaking, Guhan directly threw the sword into the black hole. Fushi was silent for a while before he suddenly said hurriedly, "It's not enough." Understood. Guhan immediately took out another sword that Fushi had forged and threw it in. "It's still not enough. It's not enough at all. It's too little. Throw 1,000 swords in. Hurry. Otherwise, the Shenyuan sword will be destroyed," Fushi anxiously urged. Guhan didn't dare to waste a single second, but if he threw the swords by hand, it would be too slow. Therefore, Ji Han simply shot out 1,000 consciousness fragments from his body. These consciousness fragments entered 1,000 different swords at the fastest speed possible, then controlled these swords and sent them into the black hole. The whole process took less than 2 seconds, it could be said to be extremely fast. After the 1,000 swords were sent into the black hole, Fushi finally fell silent for a while. However, it was only for a short while, and Fushi quickly ordered Flowing Maple to throw another 1,000 swords into the sword furnace. The materials needed to forge the Shenyuan sword had completely exceeded Fushi's expectations. Fushi continuously ordered Guhan to throw 1,000 swords into the black hole. Since Fushi was willing to do so, Guhan wouldn't be stingy either. As a result, when there were only a few swords left in Fushi's sword house, Fushi's black hole began to expand rapidly until it swallowed the entire sword house. This is. In the absolute darkness, Guhan seemed to be able to see a familiar figure. Chapter 15:18. The existence of the black hole only lasted for a moment. The light quickly returned to the sword house, but the sword furnace and the tens of thousands of swords made by Fushi had disappeared. All that was left was a long sword floating quietly in front of Fushi. I finally succeeded. Fushi let out a long sigh, and then fell to the ground powerlessly as if his bones had been pulled out. At the same time, his original legs began to change rapidly, and finally turned into a dim snake tail. Fushi revealed his original body as an innate divine demon. Is this the Shenyuan sword? Guhan quietly looked at the newly born Shenyuan sword. The feeling this sword gave Guhan was somewhat similar, but also somewhat different. The similarity was because this sword looked exactly the same as the Shenyuan sword. Even the texture of the material was exactly the same. Guhan was almost sure that this sword was exactly the same as the Shenyuan sword in terms of material. The key difference was in temperament, or spirituality. In this sword, Guhan could not feel the spirituality that once belonged to the Shenyuan sword, which was completely different from the 4 immortal killing swords. Although there was no consciousness of the sword lady in the 4 immortal killing swords at this time, Guhan knew at first glance that they were the 4 immortal killing swords of the future. However, the Shenyuan sword in front of him was different. Guhan did not find that familiar feeling. Is there something wrong? The weak Fushi also noticed the change in Guhan's expression and asked nervously. Yes, it should be right, but the feeling is still different. Guhan hesitated for a moment and finally concluded. Of course. Fushi breathed a sigh of relief when he heard Jiyu Han's words. Don't forget, the Shanhe Sheji was not painted before. I think before the Shanhe Sheji appeared, it was not the real Shenyuan sword, so you naturally couldn't feel that familiar feeling. Master, try to see if you can restore contact with Sister Shenyuan sword first. The immortal trapping sword whispered in Guhan's ear. Guhan nodded. When he was about to grasp the Shenyuan sword, countless airflows suddenly rushed out of the void and began to collide in the whole sword house. It felt like countless panicked sparrows. What is this? Both Guhan and Fushi were startled by these air currents. Clearly, the appearance of these air currents had exceeded their expectations. Appear. Fushi suddenly took out a cold mirror and shone it on the air currents. Immediately, the image of swords appeared in the mirror. It seemed that the original form of these air currents were swords. Isn't this the sword I forged? After seeing the sword in the mirror, Fushi was greatly shocked, and he stroked the mirror with trembling hands as tears streamed down his face. Fushi had thought that the swords he had forged before had disappeared. He didn't expect them to appear in such a way. What did you do to my sword? It became like this. After calming down, Fushi suddenly asked Guhan. I didn't do anything. Guhan shook his head, but he seemed to have thought of something and immediately changed his words. But when you asked me to throw these swords into the sword furnace, in order to achieve the fastest speed, I let my consciousness fragments enter these swords and controlled them to fly in. Then what about the fragments? Did they return to your body? Fushi asked hurriedly. No. Guhan shook his head. I let them fly in with your swords. They didn't come out. Oh my god, that's over 10,000 consciousness fragments. You're actually willing to waste them just like that? Fushi was shocked and felt a little pity. Clearly, in Fushi's eyes, wasting 10,000 consciousness fragments in one go was a very extravagant thing. For Fushi, or rather, for everyone except for Guhan, consciousness fragments were things that needed to be slowly split piece by piece. For Fushi, 10,000 consciousness fragments could be accumulated in 10,000 or even 100,000 years. Of course, Fushi would feel distressed if he threw all of them into the sword furnace. If Fushi knew that Guhan now had tens of billions of consciousness fragments, he would probably kill Guhan on the spot out of jealousy. It's okay. Guhan said indifferently. This made Fushi feel even more distressed. This young man was really wasteful. He didn't know what a thrifty society was at all. By the way, what's going on with these swords that look like air currents? Guhan asked as he looked at the air currents that were still flying around the room. Isn't this all you're doing? Fushi rolled his eyes at Guhan. You sent your consciousness fragments and my swords into the sword furnace together. The original sword bodies of these swords were dissolved by the sword furnace, but your consciousness fragments were refined by the sword furnace. Finally, they fused with a bit of spirituality in the swords and formed something similar to a soul. In other words, these tens of thousands of guys that are rushing around now are the souls of the swords that I made. Guhan was also stunned. He didn't expect that some consciousness fragments that he casually sent in would actually become the souls of these swords. Are these all my consciousness fragments? Guhan looked at the souls of these swords in a daze. He subconsciously ordered these souls to stop. In the next second, the souls of tens of thousands of swords that were shuttling around stopped at this moment. They floated quietly beside Guhan as if they were ready to receive orders from Guhan at any time. These really are my consciousness fragments. Seeing this scene, Guhan had to admit that the souls of these swords were smelted from his consciousness fragments. How should I deal with them? Guhan looked at the souls of these swords that were quietly waiting for his orders and said in a daze. This depends on your intentions. You can keep them by your side. They are actually good attacking methods. At least, they are more than 10 times sharper than the sword chi in your hand. With them by your side, I'm afraid that no one in this world is your opponent except for the sages, including me and my sister. Fuxi's words could be said to be extremely sincere and without any selfishness. Otherwise, Fuxi would definitely strongly suggest that Guhan hand over the souls of these swords to him, or simply give them freedom. If these are all souls, then leaving them by my side is too pitiful. It's like having 10,000 prisoners. I won't be able to feel at ease for the rest of my life. Guhan felt the souls of these swords. Although they all came from Guhan's consciousness fragments, after being smelted by the sword furnace, Guhan could feel that they were no longer his clones. If an accurate comparison had to be made, the souls of these swords were more like Guhan's children, children born from Guhan's soul. For a real father, trapping his own child by his side and using him as a weapon was obviously something that he would never do. Therefore, Guhan quickly made a decision. He looked at the wall of the sword house and asked Fuxi, "Your Majesty Fuxi, do you mind if I open a window in your house?" "Do whatever you want," Fuxi said with a bitter smile. "There's no need for my sword house to exist anymore. Do whatever you want. Let's go. I'll give you freedom." Guhan let out a long sigh. He directly pierced the immortal trapping sword in his hand into the wall of the sword house and opened a square gap. Then, the souls of these swords flew out of the gap under Guhan's command and finally disappeared into the endless sky, looking for their own freedom. After seeing the souls of these swords leave one after another, Guhan felt a little regretful. If they really stayed by his side, it would really be an unparalleled attack method in the world, even more powerful than the 100 million sword technique of the Liunyan family. However, after thinking that these were all things in the illusion and did not really exist, the regret disappeared without a trace. You can start drawing now. Fuxi and Guhan focused their attention on the Shenyuan sword again. Fuxi pointed at the two sides of the Shenyuan sword and said to Guhan, "You can draw the Shanhe Sheji on it." "Me?" Fuxi's words stunned Guhan. "Who else could it be other than you? Aren't you the only one in the untainted land who can draw the Shanhe Sheji?" Fuxi said with a smile. "But I can't draw," Guhan said with his head lowered. "No, you draw very well. If you don't believe me, you can look at the painting under your feet. I can't draw the soul of the sword or the soul of the Shanhe Sheji. The Shanhe Sheji doesn't need a soul. The Shanhe Sheji is there. As long as you have the Shanhe Sheji in your heart, you can draw it. What if I don't have the Shanhe Sheji in my heart? That depends on you. If you have the burden of human beings on your shoulders, then the Shanhe Sheji is in your heart. Ask yourself, why are you here, and why do you want me to forge a human sovereign's sword for you? I understand. I'll draw it." Guhan was finally convinced by Fuxi. He decided to draw the Shanhe Sheji on the Shenyuan sword. However, the Shenyuan sword was too hard. Guhan tried many tools, but he couldn't leave any marks on the blade of the Shenyuan sword. In the end, under Fuxi's reminder, Guhan took out the 4 immortal slaying swords. The tips of the 4 swords were all used on one point of the Shenyuan sword. Only then did he carve a light mark on the hard body of the Shenyuan sword. In the end, he carved an extremely spectacular Shanhe Sheji. "Guhan, You're too slow. I'm going crazy waiting for you. I'm really going crazy. When the last grain of rice was finished, the familiar voice finally sounded in Guhan's ears. It was the voice of the Shenyuan sword. However, in Guhan's ears, the voice sounded like it was crying. The Shenyuan sword was crying. This was something that Guhan had never encountered before. Why are you crying? Guhan suddenly asked in a daze. Nonsense. I haven't seen a film in tens of millions of years. I can't wait, the Shenyuan sword said at the top of its voice. All right, let's go home. Guhan's hand held the hilt of the Shenyuan sword. As he came into contact with the hilt of the Shenyuan sword, the broken sword house, Fushi, who had a face full of vicissitudes and a snake tail, and Nua, who was secretly peeping at the door, gradually faded in front of Guhan and finally disappeared completely. When Guhan sensed the entire world again, he had already returned to the dimensional rift, and there were two brand new girls standing beside Guhan. The memories came to an end. Chapter 15-19. I didn't expect so many things to happen in 20 years. It took Guhan 5 hours to tell Liuyan Ling all the things that had happened to him in the past 20 years. After listening to Guhan's narration, Liuyan Ling could not help but sigh. Of course, Guhan's story was cut. Of course, it was impossible for him to tell Liuyan Ling everything. Guhan simply mentioned many things, and Liuyan Ling naturally would not ask about these in detail. Everyone had their own secrets. However, Guhan still told Liuyan Ling the reason for the emergence of the Great Destruction and the matter of Sect Master Tongtian. He did not hide anything on this point. After listening to Guhan's narration, Liuyan Ling could not help but sigh. It turns out that what the Great Ancestor said in the diary is true. I thought it was just the Great Ancestor's guess. Kunzu also knows these things? Guhan asked curiously after listening to Liuyan Ling's words. He doesn't know. It's just a guess, Liuyan Ling said with a wry smile. According to Liuyan Ling, Kunzu was also investigating the origin of the Great Destruction. In the end, through various clues, he also targeted Sect Master Tongtian. However, Kunzu's diary was only a guess based on these clues. There was never any concrete evidence to prove the identity of Sect Master Tongtian. Moreover, it was said that part of Kunzu's diary was lost. Kunzu's diary for the 5 years before his disappearance could not be found. According to the family records, these diaries did not disappear later because of the poor care of the descendants. Instead, they were carried by Kunzu and disappeared with Kunzu. By the way, you said that defeating 12 Zhu Wu is the key to your sage position. What's the matter with the sword seed of creation that Song Ifei mentioned? Did you use the sword seed of creation to restore my youth? Liuyan Ling suddenly thought of something. Like a machine gun, she could not wait to ask. It's not a big deal. It's just the embryonic form of the way of heaven. Guhan's words almost scared Liuyan Ling. The embryonic form of the way of heaven was actually gone. This was not a big deal. After Liuyan Ling asked in detail, she found out that the reason why Guhan wanted to fight with 12 Zhu Wu, who had condensed the real body of Pan Ji Yu, was to obtain the flesh and will of the real body of Pan Ji Yu, so that he could use the fragments of his consciousness to recreate the way of heaven. This part of the plan was actually very successful, but it was also very thrilling. On the verge of death, Guhan finally understood the true meaning of creation and life through his son Ji Yu Fan. He combined the fragments of his consciousness with the flesh and blood of Pan Ji Yu and gave birth to a sword seed. This sword seed was the sword seed of creation, and it was also the embryonic form of the way of heaven. When this seed grew up, it meant the rebirth of the way of heaven. As the father that gave birth to the way of heaven, Guhan would be able to see the way of heaven and become a sage the moment the way of heaven broke out of the soil and was reborn. However, what Guhan did not expect was that Liuyan Ling's body was already extremely bad. According to Guhan, Liuyan Ling was already at the last moment of her life. If Guhan did not help, Liuyan Ling would have no choice but to ascend to heaven. If it was an ordinary problem, Guhan could just use the fragments of his consciousness to recreate a new body for Liuyan Ling. He had already done this on Lu Shihua's body, so it was not a big deal to do it again. However, The problem was that Liu Nianling's situation was completely different from Liu Shihua's. Although Liu Shihua was only left with a head, he was still a young man. His life force was still the life force of a young man, and his soul was still the soul of a young man. However, Liu Nianling was different. In order to use the human Dao sword Maiden in her hands, Liu Nianling used her lifespan as the price. This caused Liu Nianling's soul to be like an old man who was about to die. This was something that could not be saved by any means. Even if Guhan had trillions of consciousness fragments, he could not save Liu Nianling's life. However, the moment he saw the world creation sword seed in his body, Guhan knew that it was the only thing that could save Liu Nianling. This was because the world creation sword seed represented the heavenly way and represented the power that could regenerate the heavenly way. It was a new power that came from the origin of the world. Only such power could allow Liu Nianling to regain her life and save Liu Nianling's extremely old soul. Therefore, Guhan used the world creation sword seed without hesitation. After knowing this, Liu Nianling completely melted in Guhan's arms. She buried her head in Guhan's chest and said while crying, "You fool, you used such a precious world creation sword seed. What are you going to do in the future? If there's no heavenly way, won't you never be able to defeat sect leader Tongtian? Won't I be the sinner of the entire human race? Won't we still die in the hands of sect leader Tongtian in the future? That won't happen." Guhan gently stroked Liu Nianling's shoulder and said, "If I can create the world creation sword seed once, I can create the second world creation sword seed. All I need is Pangu's flesh and blood. I believe that there must be other Pangu's flesh and blood in this world. By then, I can create another world creation sword seed." Liu Nianling did not speak. She could feel the great confidence of the man beside her. This confidence made Liu Nianling unable to say anything to refute. She chose to believe in Guhan. Well, after being touched, let's get down to business. So many people are still dawdling in the ruins of Yuzhang City. Let's not stay here any longer. Let's go directly to Yangjing City. Ji Yuhan suddenly changed the topic. That won't do. Liu Nianling jumped up instinctively. She wiped away her tears and objected, "There are still hundreds of millions of people left in Yuzhang City. If these hundreds of millions of people move at the same time, what if the surrounding Yuan Ku attack us? We can't take care of all of them. We can only go to Yangjing City in batches." That was before I woke up. Ji Yuhan smiled faintly as an unparalleled domineering aura emanated from his body. "Now that I'm awake, all of you Yuan Ku must obediently kneel before me." In a lush forest, countless Yuan Ku were hiding. 3 universe-level Yuan Ku were leading them. These 3 universe-level Yuan Ku were all Yuan Ku from the Western Beast Camp. They had gathered all their subordinates. There were about 30,000 to 40,000 Yuan Ku of various ranks. Reporting to Holy Beast Great Sovereign, all the humans in Yuzhang City are moving. The stream of people stretches from one end of the horizon to the other. It's impossible to see the end. It seems like all the humans guarding Yuzhang City have come out. A vampire-like Yuan Ku said to the universe-level leader, "Yuan Ku. Ha ha ha. It seems like we can have a good meal this time. The humans are so stupid to move together." The Holy Beast was very excited when he heard the vampire's words. That can't be right. These humans have always moved in small batches. They were always escorted by immortal sword rank sword bearers. We never had a chance to attack them. Why are they all moving now? I'm afraid there's a problem here. Another universe-class bandit said worriedly. What problem could there be? Even if the humans have set up some kind of trap, I don't want to kill all the humans. We will sneak an attack at the edge of the formation and kill tens of thousands of humans in one go. Then, we will leave immediately. We will not stay for even a second. These humans have stretched the formation so long, and they don't even have 100,000 sword bearers left. I heard that there are less than 30 sword bearers at the immortal sword tier. They will not be able to protect such a long formation. As long as we move fast enough, we will definitely be able to kill to our heart's content before the human elites can react. However, I heard that there are now 2 more Emperor Sword level sword wielders among the humans. One of them is extremely powerful and has killed many of his companions who are at the same level as him. Even the 12 grand sorcerers are no match for him. Won't we be sending ourselves to our deaths if we go? That's just a rumor. I heard from a guy in the heavenly court that the 12 ancestors of sorcery are so powerful that even the heavenly court can't defeat them. Moreover, they have the ability to condense the real body of Pangu. Anyway, they are very, very powerful and definitely not something that humans can resist. The reason why humans are still alive is because the 12 ancestral shamans didn't want the heavenly court to take advantage of the situation and attack them from behind. Therefore, humans are only lucky to have survived this time, the holy beast said disdainfully. Then it must be true that there are 2 more sword emperors. We saw the phenomenon when they ascended to the throne with our own eyes. It can't be wrong. 2 more is 2 more. If we can't beat them, we will run. If the 3 of us run with all our might, the Jendi can't catch us. The holy beast's words finally convinced the other 2 Yuenko. After a brief discussion, the 3 of them decided to launch a surprise attack from the most secluded place. The entire battle lasted for only a minute. After a minute, everyone would retreat. Even if the human emperor sword rank sword bearers reacted, they would not be able to reach the battlefield within a minute. One had to admit that this plan was very correct. At the beginning of the plan, it was executed very smoothly. In a short span of 2 to 3 seconds, hundreds of humans were killed by the sudden appearance of the Yuan coup. Unfortunately, the results of the battle were just that. Less than 10 seconds after the battle began, the void around the entire battlefield opened up in an instant, swallowing all the humans and Yuenko nearby into the void. The humans that entered the void were quickly released by the void door. However, the Yuan coup were not so lucky. Even the 3 universe rank Yuan coup who often ran around in the void suddenly realized that they could no longer control the void. They, including the Yuan coup that they led, were all trapped in the void and could not move at all. In the last moments of the 3 universe rank Yuan coups' lives, they only saw a few sword energies coming out of the void. Then, they said goodbye to this world. Chapter 1520. At least 100 people have died. This is what Guhan promised me. There will be no casualties. 2 minutes later, Liu Ling and Lu Shihua arrived at the battlefield. Looking at the corpses all over the ground and the silent crowd gathered around the corpses, praying secretly, Liu Ling said angrily, "Where's Guhan? Guhan, come out. Explain to me, is this what you meant by there will be no casualties?" Liu Ling said to the people around her with a displeased look. She clearly knew that Guhan should be in the void nearby and could definitely hear what she said. "Miss Ling, Master is killing the Yuan coup in the void. It will take some time before he can come out." Lu Shihua quickly explained to Liu Ling what about the victims. "I told you, don't leave in a hurry. Sending them back to Yangjing City in batches is the right thing to do." Liu Ling sighed. Although there are only 100 lives, they are still human lives. If they die here, how can I face their parents, brothers, and children? "No, Miss Ling, it hasn't been more than 5 minutes. They haven't," Lu Shihua suddenly said to Liu Ling. In the next second, a huge angel with 6 pairs of 12 wings appeared behind Lu Shihua. This angel slowly flapped its huge wings, and rays of golden light shone from the angel's wings. All the victims who were illuminated by this light began to recover quickly. Even the victims who only had half of their bodies left began to recover slowly. Finally, after 20 seconds, all the more than 100 victims regained their complete bodies. At the same time, they slowly opened their eyes and looked at their hands in disbelief. They could not understand how they suddenly came back to life. "I forgot that you still have the ultimate skill of resurrection," Liu Ling muttered. This was the advanced skill of the Sword of the Seraphim, and it could revive the lives of allies in a large area. However, the greater the number of resurrected people and the higher the original strength of the resurrected people, the more sword essences needed to be consumed. And this consumption was enormous. Generally speaking, to resurrect a spirit sword level sword wielder, Lu Shihua's sword essence would almost be completely consumed. However, most of the victims were ordinary humans. To Lu Shihua, the consumption of sword essence was negligible. Lu Shihua estimated that he hadn't even consumed 10% of his sword essence. Therefore, after casting the advanced skill, Lu Shihua was able to hover in the air calmly. He didn't show any signs of overexertion. Isn't this a zero casualty? Lu Shihua grinned at Liuyan Ling. Thank you, Shihua Jendi. Thank you, Frost Jendi. Long live Shihua Jendi. Long live Frost Jendi. Seeing the dead come back to life, whether it was the dead or the spectators, they all couldn't help but kneel on the ground and cry tears of joy. Yep, anyone who saw this scene of resurrection would have the same reaction. So what? Don't forget, your skill has a 24-hour cooldown. Within 24 hours, don't even think about resurrecting other humans. Liuyan Ling rolled her eyes at Lu Shihua. At that moment, a nether door opened and a smiling Guhan leisurely walked out. What are you guys arguing about? Isn't it because of you? Liuyan Ling rolled her eyes at Guhan again. Is this the zero casualty you promised me before we left? Isn't this zero casualty? Did anyone die here? Guhan squinted his eyes as he spoke. Then I have to thank your apprentice for resurrecting these unlucky bastards. However, your apprentice's resurrection skill has a 24-hour cooldown and corpses must be resurrected within 5 minutes of death. If there's another wave of Yuan Ku attacking, what are you going to do? Liuyan Ling coldly snorted as she spoke. Don't worry, these Yuan Ku are just hiding in the dark. The road ahead is clear and there won't be any more Yuan Ku coming to disturb us. Guhan smiled. What did you do? Liuyan Ling instinctively felt that something was wrong. Nothing much, I just killed all the Yuan Ku along the way. Oh right, Zhu Xian and the others are still in front, I'm going to go help them. You and Shihua can continue to guard this place. Guhan smiled and disappeared into the nether. Just as Guhan had said, the road was clear. Except for a few scattered Yuan Ku, no other large-scale Yuan Ku dared to attack the migrating human army that stretched for dozens of kilometers. It was as if all the Yuan Ku along the way had disappeared. As for the humans who died in the hands of the scattered Yuan Ku, Lu Shihua arranged for them to be quickly frozen in medical pods. After 24 hours, they would all be resurrected by Lu Shihua using the resurrection skill. As for what had happened along the way, perhaps the humans weren't too clear about it, but all the Yuenko had spread the news. They said that there were 4 extremely terrifying sword ladies who held unrivaled longswords in their hands. They swept away thousands of enemies and slaughtered tens of thousands of miles away. Even the universe-level Yuenko couldn't take 3 moves from them. As for the prehistoric-level Yuenko, when they saw them, they immediately fled, not even wasting a minute. After more than 10 days, all the bandits along the way were either directly killed or fled from the vicinity of this road. In the end, after the human army spent a full 2 months to reach Yangjing City, the reality was just as Ji Yuhan had promised. Except for tens of thousands of people who died of old age during the migration, no humans died in the hands of Yuan Ku. Guhan really fulfilled his promise to Liuyan Ling, which was to lead the humans to complete the migration with 0 casualties. This also became the first time in human history that more than 100 million people had migrated at the same time without any casualties. Whether it was before or after this, no one had ever achieved such a record. It became a masterpiece in history. After 4 years of continuous migration, the humans finally returned to the starting point of Yangjing City. However, 2/3 of the total population had died, and they finally returned to the largest city in human history. These poor people didn't even have time to tidy up their fragile hearts. Under the organization of the Reconstructed Council and various administrative agencies, large-scale reconstruction began. Of course, the Sword Committee was also rebuilt during this period of time. Although Guhan was unanimously elected as the new chairman of the Sword Committee, Guhan made it clear that he still had a lot of things to do. He would only stay in Yangjing City for now. When Yangjing City was more or less stable, he had other important things to do. Therefore, in the end, the new chairman of the Sword Committee was still Lu Shihua. In fact, compared to the powerful Guhan, most people still trusted Lu Shihua, the chairman of the Sword Committee who had been in charge of human affairs for more than 10 years. It was just that Liu Shihua made it clear at the beginning that she would not participate in the election, so she voted for Gu Han. Faced with this position again, Liu Shihua was a little hesitant. She actually wanted to follow her master, but considering the current messy situation of human beings, she finally accepted this position under Gu Han's persuasion. At the same time, Gu Han promised Liu Shihua that it would be enough for her to work for another 5 years. After 5 years, Gu Han would keep Liu Shihua by his side and live like a celestial couple. With Gu Han's promise, Liu Shihua happily began to take charge of the daily work of Yangjing City. The first big problem that Liu Shihua faced was to ensure that the survivors had enough to eat. Although there was enough food stored in the fleeting time gap that was under control for 10 years, the food was a non-renewable resource. If the daily production of Yangjing City was not restored as soon as possible, Yangjing City would fall into a crisis of food shortage sooner or later. Since it had been abandoned for 5 years, the fertile fields around Yangjing City had been turned into shrubbery. In the absence of large-scale construction machinery, Liu Shihua organized all the sword-bearers who were above the level of famous swords. They used their sword auras to help the farmers clear the land. Within 10 days, all the shrubbery growing on the fertile fields had been cleared. At the same time, a small team of sword-bearers was sent to clean up the nearby Yuan-ku. Most of the survivors had become farmers. In the absence of agricultural machinery, they had to grow vegetables and rice by hand to ensure the most basic food supply. Secondly, they had to rebuild the 7th ring wall of Yangjing City that was destroyed by the 12 Zhu Wu. Only about 1/3 of the wall was left. Otherwise, without the protection of the wall, the people living in Yangjing City would not be able to sleep well. However, building the wall required a large amount of materials. Even if all the industrial equipment in Yangjing City was complete, it would still take about 10 years to prepare the materials. However, more than 70% of the industrial area in Yangjing City had been destroyed. It was obvious that they could no longer produce the materials needed to build the wall. Fortunately, Yangjing City did not only have the 7th ring wall. Yangjing City also had the 6th ring wall, the 5th ring wall, the 4th ring wall, and so on. Under Gu Han's suggestion, Liu Shihua decisively decided to abolish the 6th ring wall, the 5th ring wall, and the 4th ring wall. He decided to build a Yangjing City that no longer had any wall inside the wall. He simply used all the materials from the remaining 6 walls to repair the 7th wall. With the help of a large number of survivors, the walls of Yangjing City were repaired at an astonishing speed. In the face of humanity's comprehensive reconstruction work, Yuan-ku was naturally unwilling to let humanity stand up again. Therefore, under the leadership of the Heavenly Court and under the full support of the Fusang Demon Realm, Yuan-ku began a large-scale gathering. This time, it was said that there were tens of millions of Yuan-ku gathered. They were prepared to attack Yangjing City before it was completely repaired and kill a large number of humans. Even if they could not destroy humanity, they would make it impossible for humanity to raise their heads in the next 100 years. In fact, preparations for this battle had already begun as early as when the 12 Zhu Wu was killed. This was because they had to mobilize tens of millions of Yuan-ku. At the same time, the 4 Yuan-ku forces had to work together and work hard to gather the most powerful force to destroy all of humanity in one go. Therefore, when humanity began to carry out a large-scale migration, the main force of Yuan-ku chose to watch from the sidelines. It was not until everything was ready that they finally revealed their sharp fangs to humanity. In this way, another large-scale battle around Yangjing City began. At this time, Gu Han was not in Yangjing City. He was accompanying Song Yifei to find her master. Chapter 1521. You. Master. Master. Seeing Song Yifei wailing in the ruins of Mingyuan City, Gu Han did not know what to say. Perhaps the best thing to do at this time was to let Song Yifei continue to cry until she had vented all the grief in her heart. In fact, Gu Han had long known that Mingyuan City had been destroyed. When he discovered that the black crystal was most likely sect leader Tongqian's divine sense, Gu Han immediately rushed to Mingyuan City, intending to completely destroy the black crystal. By the time Ji Yuhan arrived, it was already too late. Mingyuan City had already been destroyed, and Sword Emperor Mingyuan had completely disappeared without a trace. There was no trace of his existence. However, Gu Han did not tell Song Yifei about this, because he knew that once Song Yifei knew about this, she would immediately return to Mingyuan City, and Gu Han would have to go to Yuzhong City to save her. In this case, Song Yifei, who had left his side, was likely to be in great danger. Therefore, Gu Han finally decided to hide this from Song Yifei, or never told her that he had gone to Mingyuan City, and deliberately asked Song Yifei to accompany him. He had repeatedly dispelled Song Yifei's idea of returning to Mingyuan City to coordinate with the Nine Deaths' lifeless sword and ascend to the throne. It was not until the reconstruction of Yangjing City was on the right track and all the humans had successfully returned to Yangjing City that Song Yifei once again strongly requested to return to Mingyuan City that Gu Han had no choice but to agree to her request. However, this time, Gu Han accompanied Song Yifei to Mingyuan City and pretended that he had just discovered that Mingyuan City had been destroyed. Sure enough, when she saw that Mingyuan City had been completely destroyed and that there were only human skeletons left in the city, Song Yifei burst into tears and collapsed in an instant. As for Ji Han, he silently waited by Song Yifei's side until Song Yifei's tears were about to dry before he gently hugged her body and let Song Yifei fall asleep in his embrace. "I want to avenge Master. Gu Han, I want to avenge Master." After Song Yifei woke up again, she did not continue to cry, but she frantically shouted that she wanted to avenge her master. Seeing Song Yifei's crazy look, Gu Han could not help but sigh and say, "Calm down, your master is probably not dead yet." "Gu Han, what do you mean? My master is really not dead." Song Yifei immediately became extremely happy when she heard this. She grabbed Gu Han's arm and asked nervously, "Yes." Ji Han nodded and said, "After all, your master is an emperor sword wielder. After an emperor sword wielder dies, they must ascend to the heavens. The entire China region can see the pillar of light that is produced when they ascend to the heavens. This hasn't changed in the past 1,000 years, so if your master dies, then there will definitely be a light pillar of ascension." But we didn't see such a pillar of light appear from the beginning to the end. Also, look at the scene. There are almost no signs of an intense fight. All the human corpses were crushed in an instant. However, the core of Mingyuan City, the Mingyuan Tower, is still in perfect condition. I have sensed it nearby, and there is no residual power of Gendi's level. This means that your master did not fight with the culprit. It is very likely that she left the Mingyuan Tower and followed the culprit. I'm guessing that the reason why the culprit destroyed Mingyuan City was to obtain your master, and your master is extremely useful to the culprit. So, I'm guessing that the culprit hasn't killed your master yet, but wants to use her. Gu Han analyzed calmly. This analysis made Song Yifei quickly calm down, and he was no longer in a crazy state. In reality, Gu Han was not telling the whole truth, or rather, he was only telling the half-truth. Once an emperor sword wielder died, there would indeed be an ascension light pillar. Moreover, the ascension light pillar could indeed be seen clearly in all of China. However, the problem was that if the culprit did not kill Mingyuan Gendi in Mingyuan City and brought him to the void, or to Europe or America to kill him, the people of China would not be able to see the light pillar of Mingyuan Gendi's ascension. As for why the Dark Iris Pagoda was unscathed, it could be explained by the Dark Iris Sword Emperor coming out of his own accord to surrender. The other explanation was that the Dark Iris Sword Emperor was simply too powerful. He was so powerful that the Dark Iris Sword Emperor didn't even have the ability to resist before he was killed. Gu Han did not doubt the Tongtian sect's strength. In the Seize the Throne of the Nine States, Gu Han had experienced it once. Even if Gu Han succeeded in ascending to the throne, Gu Han did not have more than a 1% chance of defeating the Tongtian sect, let alone Mingyuan Gendi. Ji Han, you're so smart, you must know who the person who took my master away is. Who is the mastermind behind the scenes? Where can we go to save master? Song Yifei looked at Gu Han with a pleading gaze. Gu Han nodded with a serious expression. I can guess that there are only 3 forces in the world that can take your master away without a sound. One is the Heavenly Court, the other is Mountain Paradise, and the last is the Tongtian sect. It can't be Mountain Paradise or the Heavenly Court. They have a good relationship with my master. Even if their leaders want to defeat my master, they will have to put in a lot of effort. My master has fought with them before. Without more than a day, they won't be able to hurt my master at all. It must be the Tongtian sect. It must be the Tongtian sect. Has he been resurrected? Song Yifei said in terror. She had already learned the origin of the Great Apocalypse from Guhan. She also knew that the Tongtian sect was the mastermind behind all this. She also knew that the Tongtian sect had been freed from the seal of the Seamless Corridor and was now preparing to be resurrected. I guess it's him too. Guhan sighed. There's something I haven't told you yet. I'm 80% sure that the black crystal in my master's hand is the divine sense of the Tongtian sect. For so many years, he has been absorbing the filth in Yuan Ku's body to strengthen himself. I think he has almost recovered by now. That's why he jumped out and kidnapped your master. Your master probably never dreamed that he would be captured by the black crystal that he had guarded all his life. I'm afraid that's why your master didn't even have time to resist. Then what should we do? The Tongtian sect is so powerful. We are no match for him at all. Guhan, your Genesis sword seed has been used to save Ling. Song Yifei said while trembling. The situation isn't that bad. I think the Tongtian sect hasn't recovered all his strength yet. Otherwise, he can jump out and challenge the whole world openly. There's no need for him to hide in some place and continue to hide in the dark. So I think the Tongtian sect must be secretly accumulating his strength. He doesn't have the power to challenge the whole world yet. This is our chance to defeat him. As long as we can find the Tongtian sect in time, we might be able to defeat him without becoming a saint. At that time, we can also save your master. Guhan let out a long sigh. Really? Hearing Guhan's words, Song Yifei instantly regained hope. He began to imagine the moment when he and his master would be reunited. However, Song Yifei soon became depressed again. He said in pain and depression, but who knows where the Tongtian sect is hiding now? The earth is so big, and he's so powerful. If he wants to hide, how can we find him? That's true. Guhan nodded. Although he agreed with Song Yifei, he said at the same time, as long as you do something, you will definitely leave a trace. It's only a trace the size of a quark, but it's still a trace. So I think the Tongtian sect can't hide himself completely. There must be some clues left in this world. Then, should we search through the ruins of Mingyuan City again? See if we can find any clues. Song Yifei said immediately. There's no need for that. The Tongtian sect wouldn't leave any clues for us in Mingyuan City. However, no matter how cunning, calm, and intelligent the Tongtian sect is, he can't get rid of the shackles of human nature. Most importantly, he must be full of feelings for his hometown, just like how I am full of feelings for Yuzhang City. That's why I know that after the Tongtian sect is resurrected, he will definitely go to his previous home. He will definitely go there. Even if it's just to take a look, he will definitely show up there. We will definitely be able to find clues there. Ji Yuhan said with certainty. Where is the Tongtian sect's home? Song Yifei was stunned for a moment and asked subconsciously. It's in the aquamarine palace of the Penglai Immortal Island. Guhan recalled all the stories he had seen in the illusion of the Jojo martial arts competition. Speaking of Penglai, the Chinese people's first reaction was probably Penglai City in Shandong province. However, for Guhan, who was familiar with ancient Chinese mythology, it was impossible for the ruins of Penglai City to be the Penglai Island where the Tongtian sect's aquamarine palace was located. After all, it was called an island. How could it appear on land? Penglai City was just a name given by later generations based on the legends of Penglai. According to the Classic of Mountains and Seas, there were a total of 5 immortal mountains in the sea. They were Daiyu, Yuanjiao, Fangzhong, Yingzhu, and Penglai. Among them, Daiyu and Yuanjiao were nowhere to be found in the Classic of Mountains and Seas. However, according to the records in the Sage Relics, these 2 islands had been destroyed during the Great Dragon and Phoenix War. At that time, there was only Dao ancestor Hong Jun, who was a saint, and sect leader Tongtian was only an emperor sword wielder. After that, there were only 3 islands left in the sea, Fangzhong, Yingzhu, and Penglai. Chapter 1522. Some people said that the three islands of Fangjong, Penglai, and Yingju were actually referring to Fusang Island. If one looked carefully at the map of Fusang Island, he would find that it was actually composed of 4 different large islands. They were Hokkaido, Honshu, Shikoku, and Jojo. According to geological analysis, the 2 large islands of Shikoku and Jojo should have been one large island. Later, there was a huge geological change, causing this large island to be separated into 2 large islands. If this was the case, then Fusang Island should essentially be composed of 3 large islands, which happen to correspond to Fangjong Island, Yingju Island, and Penglai Island. However, this was very different from the 3 immortal islands recorded in the Sage Relic. First of all, these 3 immortal islands were controlled by the superboss, sect leader Tongtian. Only immortals and disciples of the Je school were allowed to live there. How could Fusang people live there? However, after thinking about it carefully, since the Battle of God's Investiture, the Je school had been completely weakened. Sect leader Tongtian was imprisoned in the Purple Cloud Palace by Dao ancestor Hong Jun. The masters of the Je school were all dead and injured. The rest were just some small cats and dogs. There were not even existences at the Emperor Sword level. The control of the Je school over the 3 immortal islands was naturally greatly reduced. Moreover, the Heavenly Court also took the opportunity to kill the Je school. Therefore, it was not impossible for the 3 immortal islands to completely break away from the control of the Je school and become a battlefield of slaughter. As for the records of the Fusang people in Yanghuang, it happened to appear after the end of the Zhou dynasty. Before that, there had never been any records of the Fusang people. If this was the case, then Fusang Island might really be formed by the 3 immortal islands. After all, these 3 immortal islands were the foundation of the Je school. If one wanted to completely destroy the foundation of the Je school, it would be a matter of course to destroy these 3 immortal islands and make them completely a barren land for mortals to live in. Unfortunately, the memory of Penglai and the other 2 immortal islands in the Sage Relic was completely gone after the Great God Conferment Tribulation. Of course, Guhan did not think that Saint Jie-yin would be indifferent to the 3 immortal islands. There was only one reason why there was no memory, and that was that Saint Jie-yin had deliberately erased the memories of the 3 immortal islands in the Saint Relic to cover up the ugly things he had done back then. However, this was only Guhan's guess after all. The truth could not be determined before the investigation was clear. However, since Fusang Island was so suspicious, Guhan decided to take Song Fei to Fusang Island in person to search for some useful clues. It just so happened that Wuzhang Shifang should be on Fusang Island at this time. Guhan could take the opportunity to see what Wuzhang Shifang wanted to do. Why did he betray humanity and run to Fusang Island? Moreover, he even had a close relationship with Yuan Ku on Fusang Island. Perhaps Tongtian was behind this. Therefore, Guhan returned to Yangjing City at the last minute. After informing Lu Shihua and Liuyan Ling, he spent another day with Jiyu Fan and rushed to Fusang Island with Song Fei. Lu Shihua and Liuyan Ling originally wanted to set off with Guhan, but Guhan rejected them. The reason was quite simple. Yangjing City was now at a critical moment, and Lu Shihua and Liuyan Ling were the only 2 remaining Emperor sword wielders besides Guhan. If they did not guard Yangjing City, humanity would be in danger. Faced with Guhan's reason, Lu Shihua and Liuyan Ling could not refute it. They could only accept their fate and continue to stay in Yangjing City, silently watching Guhan and Song Fei set foot on the territory of Fusang Island. If the 3 big islands of Fusang Island were to be compared to the 3 immortal islands in the Sage Relic's memory, although there was a big difference in appearance, there was still a faint trace of similarity. Among them, the shape of Hokkaido was the most similar to Fangjong Island. The shape of Jojo and the 4 countries combined was similar to Yingju Island. The remaining Honshu Island was the most similar to Penglai Island. Hence, their target was Honshu Island. When Guhan was almost done explaining to Song Fei, the 2 of them had already set foot on the land of Honshu Island. There are humans here. As soon as they set foot on the land of Honshu Island, Song Fei could not help but exclaim. At that moment, there were 2 children wearing simple clothes made of leaves. They were looking at Guhan and Song Fei, who had suddenly walked out of the void, as well as the 12 sword women beside Guhan, in fear. "Run! Quick, run! The strange people are here." The 2 children were stunned for a moment, then immediately turned and ran as if Guhan and Song Fei were terrifying enemies. "I'll go catch them." The celestial extinguished sword was the first to fly out. How could the 2 children outrun the celestial extinguished sword? In just 2 or 3 seconds, they were caught by the celestial extinguished sword. "He's a real human, not Yuenko." The small hands of the extinguished immortal sword pinched the bodies of the 2 children, then said to Ji Yuhan with certainty. There were 2 humans on the land of Hunju Island, and they were 2 human children. This was very suspicious. Back then, Fusang Island could be said to be the island that had been invaded the most by Yuan Ku. After all, Fusang Island had created the most 2D characters. It was said that the number of Yuan Ku who had landed on Fusang Island in a year was almost equivalent to 1/10 of the total population of Fusang Island. How could Fusang Island escape from the massacre of so many Yuan Ku? In just a year, more than 99% of the people of Fusang Island had died. Only the last tens of thousands of people had escaped by hiding in an underground nuclear base secretly built by Fusang country. Later, they were discovered by Hongayu Jendi and brought back to Yangjing City. This group of people of Fusang Island later became the source of the Fusang bloodline of all humans. After that, the human army entered Fusang Island several times. In the end, they came to the conclusion that all the humans on Fusang Island had died. Fusang Island had completely become Yuan Ku's paradise. There were absolutely no survivors. However, at this moment, on this island, Guhan actually met 2 living Fusang humans. Could it be that the previous detection of humans was wrong? Were there still survivors on Fusang Island? No matter how he thought about it, this was an incredible thing. However, the celestial extinguished sword's inspection would not be wrong. These 2 children were indeed real humans. "Where are you from? Are you born and raised here? Where is your village?" Ji Yuhan asked the 2 children. As a result, the 2 children shook their heads desperately with a hint of fear in their eyes. Their mouths spat out gibberish in Fusang language. Guhan also knew Fusang language, or rather, he was quite proficient in it. After all, before Guhan became a sword-bearer, he had learned some Fusang language. Later, when he entered Ultraman's dimensional world, he also lived in Fusang for a few days. With Guhan's amazing language talent, he could be considered to have mastered many common Fusang words. It was a pity that Ji Yuhan could not understand the Fusang language that these children were speaking. It was not that these children were not speaking Fusang language at all. These children were indeed speaking Fusang language pronunciations. However, the problem was that when they combined these pronunciations, Guhan could not understand them at all. For example, in normal Chinese, they could say, "The weather is good today. Let's go on an outing together." However, in the words of these children, it became, "I'm going on an outing tomorrow. Today, I'm so angry that I can't go." No one could understand what these words meant. This was also the reason why Ji Yuhan was confused when he heard the Fusang language spoken by these children. What should we do? Can any of you think of a way to communicate with these 2 children? Guhan handed this heavy responsibility to the sword ladies behind him. These sword ladies looked at each other and finally ignored Guhan's words. They could not even understand Fusang language, let alone communicate with these 2 children. Jakarta cry. Just as Guhan was having a headache because of this, the 2 children suddenly stretched their fingers into Guhan's arms and looked curiously at Qingpin, who was in the infant nursery bag in Guhan's arms. This little guy was eating a piece of beef jerky, and at the same time, a pair of big eyes sized up the 2 little kids curiously. "Do you want to eat this?" As if seeing through the 2 children's thoughts, Qingpin handed his half-eaten piece of beef jerky to them. Squish. The 2 children nodded vigorously, and Qingpin readily handed the beef jerky to them. The 2 children immediately licked the beef jerky, which was still stained with Qingpin's saliva, as if it was some supreme delicacy. Forget it. Since they are around here, their stronghold must not be far from here. Let's split up and see if we can find their stronghold. Guhan released Qingpin from the infant nursery bag and let her play with the two children. He and the sword ladies split up to search around. Guhan thought that he would be able to find the stronghold behind these two children very quickly. However, to his surprise, Guhan searched almost the surrounding 100 kilometers, but he found nothing except ruins. It was as if these two children had appeared out of thin air. In the end, when Guhan and the sword ladies could only return to the place where they had landed, Qingpin and the two children disappeared together. Ji Han couldn't help but turn pale with fright, and he even felt a strand of deep worry. One had to know that the reason why Guhan was at ease leaving Qingpin here to accompany the two children was that Qingpin's current strength was not that of an ordinary ancient sword wielder. In terms of pure strength, Qingpin, who had absorbed half of the power of the Qingping sword, was no weaker than any universe-level Yuan Ku. Even if there was a prime val Yuan Ku, Qingpin could still fight for dozens of minutes. Even if they really encountered a powerful Yuan Ku, Qingpin only needed to send a warning to Guhan, and Guhan would be able to rush back immediately. Therefore, Guhan was at ease leaving Qingpin here, thinking that there would not be too much of a problem. In the end, Qingpin actually disappeared with them. However, fortunately, the trace of connection between Qingpin and Guhan did not disappear. Following this trace of connection, Guhan believed that he could find Qingpin, who had disappeared. Chapter 1523. This is where Qingpin and the others disappeared. When Guhan traced the connection with Qingpin all the way to a wasteland, Guhan's sense of Qingpin had reached its maximum. This also meant that this was where Qingpin was. However, the problem was that what appeared in front of Guhan was a barren stone forest. The ground was full of all kinds of gravel and there was not even a tree. Beyond the gravel beach was an endless sea. This was a spacious area by the sea. The visibility conditions here were quite good. Therefore, Guhan could be very sure that there was absolutely no Qingpin within a radius of 10 miles. However, according to the sense between Guhan and Qingpin, Qingpin was indeed nearby. There was no doubt about it. While Guhan was still scratching his head for a while, Celestial Execution Sword was the first to mutter to itself, "Strange, this place feels so familiar. Sister, you also have this feeling. I also feel that this place is very familiar, as if I have seen it somewhere before." Celestial Extinguish Sword immediately followed behind Celestial Execution Sword and said. Celestial Captive Sword and Celestial Slayer Sword also nodded, indicating that they indeed felt very familiar with this place. Could it be that this is really Penglai Island? Guhan couldn't help but feel excited. If there were any places that could make the 4 Celestial Execution Swords feel familiar at the same time, it would only be Penglai Island and sect leader Tongqian's Aquamarine Palace. After all, the 4 Celestial Execution Swords had lived there for tens of millions of years. Of course, they would be very familiar with that place. Celestial Execution Sword, Celestial Slayer Sword, do you think this is Penglai Island? Or even Aquamarine Palace? Guhan asked the 4 of them excitedly. Ah, now that you mention it, it really feels a little similar, Celestial Slayer Sword said while covering its mouth. No, I remember that Penglai Island is a paradise on Earth. There is definitely no place as bad as the environment around here. Look at the gravel on the ground and the bare land. How is this our extremely beautiful Penglai Island? Kill Immortal Sword frowned and said incredulously. It's not strange that it's desolate. After all, the Chan sect and the Ren sect looted the entire Penglai Island and even completely cut off the immortal meridians of the 3 islands. Therefore, the 3 islands of Penglai Island, which looked like a paradise on Earth, are long gone. It's normal for it to become desolate, Guhan indifferently said. The 4 Immortal Execution Swords lowered their heads at the same time. Guhan's words clearly touched their hearts. Wait, why does this stone look so familiar? That's the rock in our green touring palace. Immortal Trapping Sword looked at the rock on the ground and suddenly exclaimed. That's impossible. The stones in our Aquamarine Palace are all huge. How can there be such a crappy stone that's not even the size of a fist? Exterminate Immortal Sword subconsciously denied. However, Immortal Trapping Sword's words touched Guhan. He could not help but pick up a stone from the ground and put it in front of his eyes to observe it carefully. Then, in an instant, Guhan's eyes flashed with an astonishing light. He immediately controlled a fragment of consciousness to enter the small stone. Then, his whole body began to tremble with excitement. Lady Immortal Trapping Sword, you're right. This stone is indeed an old item from the Aquamarine Palace. Moreover, you must be very familiar with it, Guhan said in a low voice. Impossible. I remember every stone in the Aquamarine Palace. There's absolutely no such crappy stone under my feet. Exterminate Immortal Sword still did not believe Guhan. She picked up a stone from the ground and was about to throw it into the sea. However, the moment she held the stone with both hands, she was completely stunned. No way. Could this stone be? Exterminate Immortal Sword's teeth chattered with excitement. It's the treasure-snatching rock. This stone is the treasure-snatching rock. Exterminate Immortal Sword tightly held the small stone in her hand and tried to speak in an indifferent tone. Impossible. Is this the legendary treasure-snatching rock? Isn't that a peerless and incomparably hard divine object in the world? It was used by Hongjun ancestor to store primordial treasures. How could it have turned into gravel on the ground? Don't make fun of me. Xian Yuan's sword also picked up a stone from the ground. However, she could not sense anything about it. She only felt that it was an ordinary stone in her hand. This is the treasure-snatching rock. It can't be wrong. The four of us lived in this rock for millions of years. Later, the old master let us cultivate by his side. How could we be wrong about this stone? Exterminate Immortal Sword snatched the fragment of the treasure-snatching rock from Xian Yuan's sword's hand. She held it in her hand as if it was her home. Forget it. Since the moment I was born, I've never seen a treasure-snatching rock. It's normal that I don't recognize it. Whatever you say. Xian Yuan's sword spread out her hands and said indifferently. Extinguishing Immortal, when did you leave the treasure-snatching rock? Ji Yuhan's heart skipped a beat and he asked the extinguishing Immortal Sword in a low voice. I don't remember the specifics. At that time, we closed our eyes and opened them for hundreds of thousands of years. How could I tell the exact time? However, I remember that when we left the treasure-snatching rock, the old master kept us by his side. Later, he took us to witness the scene of Goddess Envywer proving her Tao and becoming a sage. We will never forget that scene for the rest of our lives. Exterminate Immortal said with nostalgia. So you left the treasure-snatching rock before Goddess Envywer proved her Tao and became a sage and created the human tribe. Guhan's heart began to beat slightly. Do you remember why you left the treasure-snatching rock? Guhan asked again. Of course it was the old master who took us away. Exterminate Immortal Sword rolled her eyes at Guhan. Did you see sect leader Tongtian the moment you left? Did he personally take you away from the treasure-snatching rock? Guhan asked. Of course, yes. Damn it. I don't remember. Sorry. It's been too long. I can't remember how we left. Sisters, do you remember? Exterminate Immortal Sword scratched her head. Unable to recall, she could only throw the question to the other sisters. I can't remember either. Exterminate Immortal Sword shook her head. Exterminate Immortal Sword followed suit. Only Immortal Trapping Sword's expression changed. Sister Immortal Trapping Sword? What about you? Do you remember? Exterminate Immortal Sword took the initiative to ask. None of you remember. How could I remember? Immortal Trapping Sword lowered her head and said. Come on, it seems that the four of us have completely forgotten. But Guhan, why are you asking about the past? Shouldn't we hurry up and find Qingpin? Exterminate Immortal Sword said impatiently. No need. I think I already know where Qingpin is. Guhan looked around and found the biggest stone in the stone forest. It was almost the size of a human body. Guhan placed both hands on the biggest stone. After sensing the world inside, he nodded and said, There's a sealed space here. It can only be opened with a special method. This should be a special method of the tribe of severity. I don't know how to do it. Do any of you know? A special method of the tribe of severity? Exterminate Immortal Sword was stunned. Then, she imitated Guhan and placed both hands on the stone. With just a slight touch, the celestial exterminating sword immediately reacted and said, F***CK, it really is our Jeschool's prime clear 6 directions great technique. I didn't think that after so many years, I would still be able to see such a pure technique. It's actually the 6 directions technique of severity. Exterminate Immortal Sword was moved. At the same time, seeing the curious expression in Guhan's eyes, it took the initiative to explain, the 6 directions technique of severity is a spell created by the Old Master. It's a spell specially used to seal alternate spaces. If you want to enter the alternate space sealed by the 6 directions technique of severity, you have to completely master this spell. Then, you have to obtain a spiritual talisman passed down by the Old Master. Only then can you open the world sealed by this spell. It's absolutely impossible for an outsider to enter without these 2 conditions. Even a sage can't do it. At most, a sage can destroy this world completely. It's impossible for them to enter this world. You're saying that this spell is specifically used to seal alternate dimensions? What is an alternate dimension? Ji Han asked. To put it bluntly, an alternate space is a dimensional gap. Shenyuan's sword rushed to explain. These 4 guys have stayed in the modern society for so long, but their brains haven't adjusted yet. They have to explain it using terms from the Primeval Age. What alternate space? It's just a dimensional gap that you speak of. You can say that. Exterminate Immortal Sword glared at Shenyuan's sword fiercely. Obviously, it was very dissatisfied with Shenyuan's sword's mockery. Alright, don't quarrel. It seems that poor Qing has entered this strange space. You're all sword maidens of the Jie sect. You should know how to open this alternate space, right? Guhan said immediately. Sorry, we can't open it. Exterminate Immortal Sword smiled bitterly. We're no longer the 4 immortal exterminating swords of the past. What's flowing in our bodies isn't immortal force either. We're now sword maidens. What's flowing in our bodies is the power of the sword essence. Without immortal force, we can't use the 6 directions technique of severity. That's right. Using the prime clear 6 harmonies technique is only one of the conditions. The other condition is the talisman bestowed by the Old Master. The Old Master has never bestowed such a thing to us. Even if he did, all of the talismans would be destroyed when we go against the Old Ancestor. If we can't meet these 2 conditions, how can we enter this alternate space? Exterminate Immortal Sword concluded. Let's give it a try. If it doesn't work, we'll think of another way. Guhan's heart tightened. However, he still let Exterminate Immortal Sword test it. I told you, if we can't meet these 2 conditions, we can't succeed even if we try. Although Exterminate Immortal Sword muttered, it still gave face to Guhan. It placed its hand on the broken stone of the treasure-snatching rock and began to operate and push the sword essence in its body according to the method of the 6 directions technique of severity. In the next second, a stream of clear chi shot out of the broken stone and gradually evolved into a door in the air. Chapter 1524. What the hell? How did we get in? When they officially stepped into the alternate space in the portal, the immortal extinguishing sword did not seem to have recovered from the shock just now and was still murmuring to itself. Could it be that sword essence and immortal force are interchangeable? The Shenyuan sword looked happy and immediately made a few hand gestures. Then, it shook its head helplessly and said, "It still doesn't work. Sword essence and immortal force are not interchangeable. I still can't use some immortal arts with sword essence. Maybe this 6 directions grand method of prime clear is a special case." The immortal extinguishing sword shook its head and said, "The key is where the spiritual talismans in our bodies come from. Without the spiritual talismans given by the Old Master, we can't come in at all. Maybe sect leader Tongtian secretly planted spiritual talismans in your bodies, but you just don't know it." Guhan clapped his hands and said, "Well, now is not the time to worry about these problems. I have already felt that Qing Pin is in this alternate space. When we explore this alternate space clearly, we will probably understand the whole story. Okay, let's go now." The immortal extinguishing sword cheered. When it was ready to fly out, its body turned into a light and returned to the scabbard of Guhan. Not only the immortal extinguishing sword, but the other sword ladies were also directly put into the scabbard by Guhan and then into the dimensional pocket. In the end, Guhan simply put all his clothes into the dimensional pocket, completely exposing himself naked. Wow, Guhan, what are you doing? Pervert. Guhan's behavior shocked Song-Fei, who immediately wanted to cover his eyes, but at the same time, he secretly observed Guhan with his two pupils. Quickly take off your clothes and put on this, Guhan said in Song-Fei's ear. At the same time, he plucked a few huge banana leaves from a nearby tree and put them in Song-Fei's hand. At the same time, he wrapped his lower body with a banana leaf to ensure that the most important part of his body would not be exposed. What the hell do you want? Although Song-Fei did not understand why Guhan would do this, he acted quickly. Due to her trust in Guhan and the fact that she already had a physical relationship with Guhan, Song-Fei simply took off her clothes. At the same time, she learned from Guhan to protect the important parts of her body with banana leaves. It was Qingpin who told me. She asked me to hide my identity and pretend to be the same as the people here. Guhan took the initiative to explain when he saw that Song-Fei had already worn the leaves. That's right, this is still not enough. We still don't look like the people here. Ji Han pulled his hand behind him and pulled out two fellows who were hiding in the bushes at the side. These two guys looked at Guhan and Song-Fei with extreme fear in their eyes. Their limbs were constantly struggling, trying to escape from Guhan's control. But how could these two guys do this? They were like chickens in a snakeskin bag. They were just struggling in vain. Guhan's eyes glanced at the two guys who were struggling, then he grabbed a handful of soil from the roadside and rubbed it directly on his body. Soon, his body was covered with dirty soil. Song-Fei also enjoyed the same treatment. Guhan used the soil to turn into an African girl. But this was not enough. Guhan neatly grabbed all kinds of hair accessories on Song-Fei's head. Song-Fei's black and shiny long hair fell down along her shoulders. Unfortunately, such perfect long hair could only be seen for a short time. Guhan got a basin of mud out of nowhere and poured half of it on Song-Fei's head. The other half was poured on Guhan's head. In this way, Guhan and Song-Fei perfectly became the natives of this world. At least they looked exactly the same as the natives of this world. They all looked like primitive humans. You two go to sleep first. You'll be fine after a week. Guhan's sword fell on the heads of the two natives. The two natives instantly fainted. Then they were thrown into the deep bushes by Guhan. They would not be found for a while. After that, Guhan and Song-Fei, who were disguised as natives, swaggered to the place where Qingpin was. This world is too desolate. It looks like hell. After walking in this alternate dimension for less than 10 minutes, Song-Fei could not help but sigh. Although there was a banana tree and a shrub at the place where they had just landed, it looked like a lush green patch of land. But when they really stepped into the core area of this alternate dimension, they found that this alternate dimension was simply a world of hell on earth. The small piece of green just now seemed to be the only green in this alternate dimension. Other than that, all the soil was bare and exposed. What was more frightening was that the color of the soil was still red. It felt like it was soaked in blood. Some rivers could be seen everywhere in this world. However, these rivers were not flowing with water. Instead, they were flowing with golden magma. The hot magma flowed unscrupulously on this land and even converged into a river. There were also many deep holes in the ground. If one was not careful, hot magma would spurt out of these holes. If Song-Fei and Guhan were not both immortal sword wielders and could use sword chi to block the magma, Song-Fei and Guhan would have been swallowed by the sudden magma attack several times. In addition to this extremely terrible environment, Guhan and Song-Fei encountered many life forms along the way. Some of these life forms were pure humans. They were walking with their heads lowered in satisfaction, as if they were searching for something on the ground. These humans looked exactly like the two children that Ji Han had met before. Obviously, those two children were children that came from this alternate dimension. However, How these two children left the alternate dimension and returned to the real world, Guhan did not know. Humans accounted for about 90% of the lifeforms that Guhan saw along the way. In addition to humans, there were all kinds of strange lifeforms. Some lifeforms had the head of a sheep and the body of a human, some had the body of a cow and the head of a human, and some looked like parts of various animals put together. Anyway, there were all kinds of strange lifeforms. Humans had a unified name for such lifeforms: monsters. Yes, that was right. In addition to humans, most of the remaining lifeforms in this alternate dimension were monsters. Guhan had seen some monsters in Yuan Ku's information, but there were other monsters that Guhan had never seen in Yuan Ku's information. Hey, what are you two humans standing there for? Hurry up and look for the longevity fruit for me. You lowly humans just like to slack off. You must eat this grandpa's whip. Just as Guhan and Song Efei were taking the opportunity to observe this alternate dimension, a monster suddenly rushed over from nearby. A thunderous whip shadow lashed at Guhan and Song Efei. This guy actually dared to hit me. I'll tear him apart. This monster was not very powerful. It was about the level of a tiger-level Yuan Ku. Song Efei was an immortal sword wielder after all. How could he be willing to be whipped by such a monster? He wanted to fight back immediately. However, Guhan grabbed Song Efei's hand in time to stop him from fighting back. He then used his body to shield Song Efei, using his own body to take the monster's whip. Although the monster had used all its strength in the whip, the problem was that even if a tiger-level Yuan Ku attacked, he would not be able to hurt an emperor sword. It was just like how an ant could not hurt a car. With this whip, it was impossible to even leave a trace of blood on Ji Yuhan's body. However, if there was really no wound, it would be too strange. Feeling helpless, Guhan could only control his body. The part of his body that was hit by the whip became red and swollen. It looked like he had really been hurt by the whip. The monster lashed out more than 10 times. Meanwhile, Guhan used his body to protect Song Efei. At the same time, he was trembling in fear. He lowered his head and did not even dare to look at the monster. Mother *K, look for the longevity fruit for me honestly. If you find it, I'll let you rest. If you can't find it, I'll beat you up tonight to vent my anger. The monster was probably tired, so he walked away while cursing. Meanwhile, Guhan and Song Efei were still bent over in fear. They did not even dare to look at the monster. The monster was very satisfied with Guhan's attitude. Why did you stop me? I promise I'll kill this damned monster as fast as I can. I won't let other monsters find out. Song Efei said angrily. It had been a long time since Song Efei had been humiliated by a monster like this. You can hide it from other monsters, but can you hide it from other humans? Guhan said calmly. At the same time, he looked around at the other humans who were secretly watching them. You can't kill these humans too, can you? They are our compatriots. Moreover, I promise that they will definitely tell the monster now. *MN. Song Efei cursed. However, he did not dwell on this issue. But fortunately, after being beaten up by this monster, I also found some clues. Ji Yuhan took a deep look at the dark red sky in the distance and said, "What clues?" Song Efei immediately asked impatiently. Firstly, when the monster scolded us just now, half of his language was the same messy Fusang language as that of the two little girls. However, the Fusang language was mixed with some Primeval language. Primitive language? What's that? Song Efei asked in confusion. It's a language from the primitive era. For modern humans, it has been lost. However, because of the Sage's relic, I learned this language. What's the second clue? The second clue is that the monsters here are all real monsters, genuine monsters born and raised on Earth. Chapter 1525. I found it. I found 3 longevity fruits. A human near Guhan suddenly shouted excitedly. Of course, this guy was still speaking in the Fusang language, but for the sake of the reader's understanding, he had changed it into a normal language. As far as Guhan was concerned, he still didn't quite understand what he was saying. Scram. Following the human's shout, the demon that had whipped Guhan earlier walked over. After confirming the item in the other party's hand, he impatiently waved his hand at the human, and the human happily ran towards the back. And through this human, Ji Han also successfully found out what exactly the longevity fruit was. This longevity fruit was actually a fiery red, fat worm with magma-like skin. Yes, this thing with the extremely auspicious name of the longevity fruit was actually a huge worm that was constantly twisting its body, causing Song Fei, who saw it for the first time, to feel extremely disgusted. What do these demons want these insects for? After feeling disgusted, Song Fei asked Gu Han curiously. What else can I do? Of course it's to eat. Gu Han said indifferently. That thing can actually be eaten. Song Fei was shocked by Gu Han's words, and immediately felt even more disgusted in his heart. It's just like having an extremely high amount of protein, and at the same time, it contains all sorts of amino acids and nutrients needed by life. For a life form, as long as the surface of the worm's body can be kept clean, then this thing is the most nutritious food in the world. Why can't it be eaten? Gu Han smiled slightly. At the same time, he stabbed his left hand into the ground, and pulled upwards, pulling out a fiery red longevity fruit. Looks like this thing lives underground, and it doesn't need to use other food. It only needs to rely on the heat underground to convert it into protein in its body. Furthermore, it is extremely sensitive to demonic energy. Once it discovers that something is wrong, it will directly drill into the depths of the ground. No wonder these demons have to rely on humans to dig these longevity fruit. Ji Han held the longevity fruit in his hand and weighed it in his hand, then understood the nature of this thing. Then do the humans here rely on eating these longevity fruit to survive? Song Fei said in disgust. It shouldn't be. The number of longevity fruit underground is limited. If they were to be used as food for humans, more than half of them would have starved to death. These longevity fruit should only have the qualifications to be eaten by demons. Gu Han laughed, his palm quickly pierced into the ground, and in the blink of an eye, he grabbed the 5 longevity fruit that were constantly moving. Ordinary people might not even be able to catch one of these bugs in a day, but to Gu Han, these bugs were just bugs. They were very easy to catch. I found it. I found 3 longevity fruit. Although Gu Han did not know how to speak the language here, it was not a problem for him to repeat the strange Fusang language that the human had spoken just now. The demon was quickly attracted by Gu Han, and when it saw that Gu Han and Song Fei each had 3 longevity fruit in their hands, it looked at the 2 humans in surprise. This demon clearly remembered that when it had beaten up the other party, there was nothing in the other party's hands. In the end, it had only been a few minutes and the other party had already caught 6 longevity fruit. Wasn't this speed a little too fast? Could it be that there is a nest of longevity fruit underground? The demon looked at the ground beneath Gu Han's feet with some envy. After chasing Gu Han away, he started to dig impatiently, but in the end, he did not find anything. The 6 longevity fruit in Gu Han and Song Fei's hands seemed to have become the best pass. Along the way, many demons passed by, and when they saw the longevity fruit in Gu Han and Song Fei's hands, they all turned a blind eye to it, and did not have any intention of stopping the 2 of them. Thus, after a long journey of 20 minutes, Gu Han and Song Fei finally arrived at the core area of this alternate dimension. It was a city made of wood that looked extremely simple and crude. And in this city, Gu Han felt an extremely strong connection with Qingpin. It seemed that Qingpin was currently in this city. At the entrance of the city, there were 3 monsters with tiger heads guarding it. Most of the people entering and leaving the city were monsters, and there were very few humans. You 2 humans, come over here. The tiger demon noticed that Gu Han and Song Fei were standing motionlessly at the city gate, and immediately said with a somewhat irritable tone. Although the other party was speaking in Fusang language that he could not understand, judging from the other party's tone, Gu Han understood that the other party wanted him to go over. Thus, Gu Han pulled Song Fei over, and the 3 tiger-headed demons did not waste any time and directly snatched the 6 longevity fruit from Gu Han and Song Fei's hands. Then, they took out 2 burlap bags and threw them into Gu Han and Song Fei's hands. Finally, they kicked their butts and sent them into the city. I must kill this demon later. He actually dared to kick my butt. Song Fei touched his, but that was only wrapped in leaves, and said while gritting his teeth, "Leave this to me, I will personally kill him. He actually dared to kick my woman's butt, he must die." Gu Han said indifferently, while Song Fei's heart instantly surged with a sense of shyness. "By the way, what's in this cloth bag?" Song Fei took out the burlap bag that the demon had thrown at him. Opening the burlap bag, he discovered that there was actually a black pill inside. It looked like a melissa. "This seems to be a collection of energy." Gu Han felt the thing inside the melissa and finally said, "Energy collection? What is this thing?" Song Fei asked in confusion. "You can think of it as something that has been refined a step further from the nutrient solution." Gu Han laughed. If such a pill were to be eaten, it would probably be equivalent to 4 to 5 days of energy. This kind of pill is probably the food of this world's humans. "Forget it, I can't eat this thing anyway. It's disgusting to look at it." Song Fei casually wanted to throw the pill away, but in the end, Gu Han reacted quickly and took the pill back into his hand. He stuffed it into his linen pocket and said, "Don't throw it away, there might be other uses for it." "I don't care. Since you already know the location of the poor, let's go and save her. I don't want to stay in this damned place for a second longer." Song Fei said somewhat irritably, "We must quickly find out where the Tongtian sect leader is hiding and then save Master. We don't have time to waste here." "Don't worry, Qingpin told me that she's very safe here. Let's first figure out what's going on here," Gu Han said with a smile. At this time, another human entered the city after handing over 3 longevity fruits. Gu Han brought Song Fei and quietly followed behind this human. Through this tracking, he discovered that the position of humans in this city was rather pitiful. Those demons were all walking in the middle of the main road, and as humans, they could only stick to the base of the wall, bend their backs, and walk forward while trembling. He didn't even dare to look directly at the demons in the middle of the road. His status was even worse than that of a slave. Although there were many houses in this city, some of them were houses, and some were shops. However, as the human walked, he didn't dare to approach a single house. He only let out a long sigh of relief when he arrived at an extremely remote place in the city, and arrived in front of a house that was even more dilapidated than all the houses in the city. It was as if he had been freed in an instant, and directly entered the house. Gu Han and Song Fei naturally followed behind the human and walked in together. After entering, he discovered that this seemed to be a place where he could eat and stay at the same time. However, the conditions were very simple and crude. The place to eat was just a long table, and the place to stay was a simple thatched bed. After the human went in, he carefully scraped off a small piece of his pill and handed it to a woman who looked like a boss. He swallowed the rest of the pill in one gulp, then fell onto the bed without washing his face or feet, and instantly fell asleep. In fact, most of the humans in the thatched hut were sleeping soundly, and there were very few humans who were awake. "Hey, pay up." Perhaps it was because the sentence was very short, but Gu Han could understand the lady boss's Fusang language. "Here you go, no need to keep the change." Gu Han was not willing to be like the human just now, who carefully cut off a small piece of the pill as payment. He directly threw the pill in his hand to the lady boss. What surprised Gu Han was that after the lady boss saw Gu Han throw a whole pill at her, she immediately became extremely vigilant. She carefully looked around, and after confirming that there were no monsters nearby, she quietly opened the door behind her, then waved to Gu Han, motioning for Gu Han and Song Fei to come in. "What does this feel like?" "It's like a spy meeting," Song Fei complained. But as the saying goes, the skilled are bold. Song Fei did not think that there was anything in this city that could stop him and Gu Han, so he simply took Gu Han's hand and walked into the small room that the lady boss opened. After sending Gu Han and Song Fei in, the lady boss immediately closed the door of the small room, pretending to be lazy and idle again, and looked at everyone who passed by outside the door. Chapter 1526. Comrade, you're finally here. Our people are ready, and we'll act tonight. Take me to your hiding place later, and we'll pick you up and leave here tonight. As soon as Gu Han and Song Fei entered the small house, they found a middle-aged man in the house talking to Gu Han and Song Fei eagerly, although Guhan could not understand a word he said. However, this did not mean that Guhan did not find anything else. On the contrary, Guhan made a huge discovery about this person. Although this person was dressed exactly like the natives of this world, Guhan could feel an aura that the natives of this alternate dimension did not have from this person. How should he put it? Unlike the rigid, sorrowful, and despairing natives in this alternate dimension who rarely had emotional changes, Ji-Yuhan felt sunshine, passion, nervousness, and many other emotions from this person. More importantly, this person had a confident temperament, which only humans who lived and grew up in a normal environment would have. To put it simply, this human did not seem to be a native of this alternate dimension, but seemed to come from the outside world like Guhan and Song-Fei. If judging from his temperament, he seemed to be very idealistic, then the looming dimensional pocket on his waist perfectly exposed his identity. Not only was this guy not a native here, but he was also a sword-bearer. Since he was a sword-bearer, it was easy to deal with him. Guhan did not bother to pretend anymore, so he directly said to the man in Chinese, "Which base city are you from? Why are you here? Who are you?" The man was taken aback. He immediately took out his sword lady from his dimensional pocket. But he quickly reacted. No matter how he looked at it, this human in front of him shouldn't be his enemy. "My name is Ji-Yu Fan, and this is my wife, Song-Fei. We are both famous sword-bearers in Yuzhang City." Guhan used his son's name as soon as he opened his mouth. After all, the name Guhan was not very suitable to be used. Because Song-Fei had been missing in the human world for 20 years, not many people knew about him. It was not a big deal even if he used his real name. Hearing that she was Guhan's wife, Song-Fei blushed and leaned on Guhan's shoulder shyly like a wife. "Oh my god, people from Yuzhang City. Isn't Yuzhang City being besieged by the 12 Zuwus? What are you doing here?" After seeing Guhan take out his famed sword Maiden's hilt, the other party immediately relaxed and asked Guhan curiously, knowing that the sword Maiden wouldn't lie. Yes, Yuzhang City was about to be finished, but then Shihua Jendi appeared. Anyway, Yuzhang City's crisis has been resolved. Now humans are moving to Yangjing City, preparing to rebuild our world. Come on, what's going on with you? Why are you here? My name is Feng Wuzhang. No, my name is Amakusa Ichiro. I'm a sword wielder of the Moscow base city. Just from my name, you can tell that I'm a sword wielder of the Yamato clan. After our Moscow base was attacked, I didn't have time to evacuate with the rest of the troops, so I came to Fusang Island to take a risk, hoping to see the scenery of my hometown and have a memory before I die. In the end, I accidentally stumbled into this dimensional gap and found that all the humans here had become slaves. I was so sad and angry that I wanted to save them all. Amakusa Ichiro said. By the way, you mentioned Shihua Jendi just now. Is this Shihua Jendi the former chairman of the Sword Committee Union, Shihua Sword Deity, Lord Shihua? Amakusa Ichiro asked curiously. Didn't I hear that Lord Shihua was killed by the 12 Zuwus? Why has she returned and even become the Shihua Sword Emperor? Could it be that she has already ascended the throne and proclaimed herself as the Shihua Sword Emperor? That's right. Let me tell you, Lord Shihua was not killed by the 12 Zuwus. He was betrayed by that damned Ying Zheng. However, the Shihua Sword Emperor was blessed by the heavens, and he was actually saved by her master, the Hongjun Sword Emperor, who was passing by. After Hongjun Jendi cured Sword Deity Shihua, Sword Deity Shihua endured hardships until he had the power of an emperor sword wielder. He even jumped out and killed the 12 Zuwus and Ying Zheng, giving us humans a peaceful world. This was not said by Guhan, but by Song-Fei. What? Sword Deity Shihua has become the emperor? Hasn't he been missing for almost 20 years? Once again, Amakusa Ichiro was shocked. More importantly, Guhan realized that Amakusa Ichiro had actually heard of his name and knew of the existence of sword deity Hongjun. For a young sword wielder of the sword level, this was a very strange thing. After all, Guhan was already an internet celebrity at that time. I heard that he went to some mountain cave to fool around with some wild women. I also know that. At this point, Song-Fei rolled his eyes at Guhan and continued, here's the thing. We were ordered by Xihua Jendi to look for Master Wuzhang Shifang, the missing immortal sword wielder. Someone reported seeing Master Wuzhang Shifang on Fusang Island, so Xihua Jendi asked us to come and take a look. If we found Master Wuzhang Shifang in trouble, we should try our best to rescue him, or report to Yangjing City. Xihua Jendi will personally come to rescue Master Wuzhang Shifang. After all, humans have suffered heavy losses, and we don't want to give up on any immortal sword wielder. How do you know that Master Wuzhang Shifang is still alive? Amakusa Ichiro was shocked by Song Ifei's words, and then seemed to realize that he had said the wrong thing, so he immediately said, isn't Master Wuzhang Shifang dead? He's still alive. Amakusa Ichiro pretended to be shocked. I don't know either, so Xihua Jendi ordered me to come here and see if I could find Master Wuzhang Shifang. As a result, I came here by chance, Guhan replied. Do you know anything about Master Wuzhang Shifang? Tell me, so we can report to our superiors. Guhan said excitedly. I don't know. I don't know anything. Amakusa Ichiro waved his hand. Then forget it. Guhan sighed helplessly, then looked around and asked curiously, what's going on here? Why are there so many humans in this place, and the language of the humans here is very strange. It sounds like your Fusang language, but it sounds different. Do you know what's going on? Actually, I'm not too sure myself, but I've been here for a few months now, and I've vaguely figured out some things. Amakusa Ichiro's eyes darted around as he took the initiative to explain to Ji Han. I believe you've seen it along the way. The demons here are not primordial bandits. They don't have dimensional energy, so they're not primordial bandits from the outside world. They're demons born and raised in this world. As for why these monsters live here, I don't know. As for these humans, they seem to be the descendants of refugees who escaped here from the Great Apocalypse era. I don't know how these human ancestors escaped in here, but they were discovered by this monster. They captured these humans and made them their slaves, making them catch the longevity fruit, which is also a red-skinned insect. The humans here have been enslaved by these damned monsters for thousands of years, and what they eat are all strange pills made from some mud and stones by the monsters. They are called fortune pills by the humans here. Although eating one can make one hungry, eating too many of them can easily make one's brain stupid. These humans eat too many fortune pills, and their brains are in a mess, to the point that the original Fusang language is messed up. If I hadn't lived here for a few months and barely understood the grammar of the Fusang language here, I wouldn't have been able to understand what they were saying. Sigh. At this point, Amakusa Ichiro sighed, and said with a face full of pity, although the humans here are a little stupid, they are all our compatriots. I definitely can't watch them suffer here and ignore them. So I decided to save them all and arrange for them to be sent to a safe place. In the future, I will send them to our base city and let them live a normal life again. Good man. I'll give you a like. Hearing Amakusa Ichiro's words, Guhan immediately gave him a thumbs up in admiration, and at the same time took the initiative to ask, is there anything we can help with? Just say it, we are all human compatriots, as long as we can help, we will definitely help you. Thank you. Thank you both. Amakusa Ichiro cupped his fists and bowed to Guhan and Song Ifei, then continued, actually, I'm not alone. There are 3 of my companions waiting for me outside. At the same time, they are also responsible for protecting the humans who have been rescued. I have found a gap in this world, and through this gap, we can send the humans here out. However, the position of the gap is very steep, and ordinary people can't get through at all. Only with the help of the sword mistress can they reach there. So I have been working with some of the smart natives here. He has gathered a group of people outside and has them hide near the gap, and I will escort them through the gap overnight. Originally, I was going to meet with the human here, but I don't know how the boss lady sent you here. Amakusa Ichiro asked curiously, looking at Guhan and Song Ifei. We don't know why either. I just threw a fortune pill to the boss lady, and she brought us here. Guhan said, also puzzled. That's right. Amakusa Ichiro slapped his thigh and said, because the fortune pill is the only food here, the natives will only carefully pay a small amount of fortune pill as a accommodation fee. So the secret signal that the boss lady and I agreed on was to trade a whole fortune pill. In the end, we sent you here. What a coincidence. Chapter 1527. Not long after Guhan and the others entered the room, the indigenous man who came to meet them was also sent in by the landlady. Then, Guhan was stared at by the landlady very vigilantly for a few minutes. It was not until Amakusa Ichiro came out to explain that she let down her guard against Guhan. In the following time, Amakusa Ichiro, Guhan, and the indigenous man discussed and decided that after 7 hours, they would take the indigenous people here and escape from this strange space. After the discussion, Amakusa Ichiro left directly with the indigenous man. He only asked Guhan to meet them at the designated place after a few hours. Guhan, do you think this guy is telling the truth? After parting with Amakusa Ichiro, Song Ifei asked curiously. Half of it is true, and the other half is false, Guhan said with a look of understanding. Most of the things about this place are true, but the thing about Wuzhang Shifang is false. If I'm right, this guy is actually Wuzhang Shifang's subordinate. If we really go out with him, I'm afraid we'll be ambushed by Wuzhang Shifang. I don't know what this Wuzhang Shifang is thinking and doing. Then, are we still going out with him? Aren't you afraid of being ambushed by Wuzhang Shifang? Song Ifei laughed. What a joke. If we really go out, then Wuzhang Shifang will be afraid. Guhan smiled. But I really don't want to fight with this former senior. After all, 20 years ago, I almost became his disciple. I still need to give him some respect. Then what are we going to do now? Song Ifei looked at his personal terminal. There are still 7 hours left. Don't we find something to do? Then let's figure out the background of this place first. We've been here for a long time, and we still don't know what's going on with these monsters. Guhan laughed. When Guhan and Lin Sanju were about to capture a few demons to interrogate them, they suddenly heard a series of urgent bells ringing in the city. After the bell rang, the monsters that were wandering on the streets began to run towards the center of the city. Even the monsters outside the city began to run into the city, ignoring the humans who were working hard outside. In the center of the city was the only building that could be called grand in the entire city. All the monsters entered the building one after another. It seems that something big must have happened in this strange space. Otherwise, he wouldn't have gathered all the demons. We must find a way to go in and take a look. Guhan and Song Ifei, who were standing outside the building, looked coldly at the monsters that kept pouring into the building. There were a total of 4 entrances to the building, and each entrance was guarded by 8 demon soldiers with sharp blades. Except for the monsters, almost all the humans avoided the building and did not dare to approach it. Obviously, the building did not allow humans to enter, and most of the demon soldiers were there to stop humans. In this way, it was a little difficult. Guhan and Song Ifei definitely could not force their way in. It was not that Guhan could not defeat these demon soldiers. Even if there were 800,000 demon soldiers in front of Guhan, Guhan would not even blink. However, it was a little troublesome to figure out what was going on, so they still had to find a way to sneak in. But for a while, Guhan could not think of an effective way to sneak in. After all, the difference in appearance between humans and monsters was still too obvious. Without enough props on hand, it was also unrealistic to want to disguise as a monster. Are you at your wits' end? Seeing that Guhan did not move for a while, Song Ifei suddenly squinted his eyes and started laughing. What good idea do you have? Even if Song Ifei did not say anything, Guhan could guess that he must have an idea. Haha, finally, it's time for you to beg me. Song Ifei laughed happily, then took out a sword from his dimensional pocket and gave it to Guhan. Guhan's eyes instantly lit up. Elephant sword, your famous sword level sword mistress is actually the elephant sword. There was a reason why Guhan was so surprised. The elephant sword, like its name, had the ability to change everything in the world. It could change people into anything that you saw, and the change was extremely realistic. Even if the person was next to you, you would not be able to see any difference in the details. It could even simulate the characteristics of different abilities such as dimensional power and monster power. It was definitely the strongest sword mistress for sneaking into battle. In terms of transformation, Even an Emperor Sword level sword mistress could not reach the level of the Elephant Sword. However, in terms of combat power, the Elephant Sword was very pitiful. It only had the combat power of the lowest famous sword level sword mistress. Hence, in previous battles, Song Yifei had never taken out the Elephant Sword. After all, it was an artificial sword mistress, so Song Yifei did not need to care about its emotions. Hence, Gu Han did not know that Song Yifei's famous sword level sword mistress was actually the Elephant Sword. Otherwise, Gu Han would not have to worry about how to sneak in. Very soon, with the power of the Elephant Sword, Gu Han and Song Yifei turned into two bull demons with horns. Because bull demons were the most common in the entire city, even if there were two more of them, the guards at the entrance would not be suspicious. The power of the Elephant Sword was indeed extraordinary. When Gu Han and Song Yifei, who had turned into two bull demons, walked into the building in the middle of the city, the guards at the entrance did not notice anything wrong and let Gu Han and Song Yifei walk in. Gu Han and Song Yifei followed the crowd and passed through a few corridors. Finally, they gathered in a large open space. This was obviously a gathering place for the monsters. Apart from the large open space, there was also a high platform. Gu Han could see that there were some armed demon soldiers guarding there. There was also a row of tables and chairs. This high platform was obviously prepared for the leaders. Looks like the monsters here are going to have a meeting. Gu Han bit Song Yifei's ear and said, "Let's go a little further. This is not a good position." As they had entered the building relatively late, Gu Han was at a position furthest from the high platform. Hence, Gu Han pulled Song Yifei's hand and charged through the crowd. They forced their way from the back to the front. Many monsters glared at Gu Han, but under the threat of Gu Han's sharp horns, most of them chose to keep the peace. Charging around was part of the temperament of monsters, and it was even more so for bull demons. Therefore, although Gu Han and Song Yifei's behavior was overbearing, other monsters did not find it strange. Instead, they felt that it was a normal reaction. When Gu Han squeezed to the front, the bell rang again. This time, it was obviously the bell for the end of the gathering and the beginning of the meeting. Two monsters dressed in gorgeous clothes with extraordinary auras and strength walked out from behind the high platform and sat on the tables and chairs. These two big monsters were actually women, and Gu Han actually knew them. One of them was dressed in green and looked to be in her 60s or 70s. She looked no different from an ordinary old person, but one could vaguely see some characteristics of a monkey. This woman was called Incongruence Divine Mother. In the memory of the sage's relic, Incongruence Divine Mother was also an expert in the Jie sect. Later, when she saw that the myriad immortal array of the Jie sect was broken, she fled in a hurry. Moreover, she fled so quickly that Saint Xuanti, who wanted to capture her as a mount, could not find her. In the end, nothing happened. The other woman looked to be in her 20s or 30s. She wore a feather dress that was as white as the clouds, and her mature temperament could not be concealed. Not only did Gu Han see this woman in the memory of the sage's relic, but he also saw her in the illusion of the 9 prefectures' deer-seeking realm. This woman was the eldest sister of the 3 sky fairies, Lady Yunxiao. However, according to the records in the sage's relic, Lady Yunxiao should have been suppressed by Taishang Laojun. However, it was unknown how she ended up here. Initially, Gu Han thought that there was no high-end combat power in this alternate space. However, after seeing Incongruence Divine Mother and Lady Yunxiao, Gu Han knew that he was wrong. Incongruence Divine Mother and Lady Yunxiao were both at the desolate level Yuan Ku level. They belonged to the top Yuan Ku. Of course, these two were not Yuan Ku. They were monsters that were born and raised in this world. Patriarch Incongruence, Patriarch Yunxiao. May I know which patriarch has rung the roving jade bell and summoned us here? When the two big shots appeared, some of the demons below the stage impatiently asked. Naturally, we have something important to summon you here. Incongruence Divine Mother said in a deep voice, the reason why we gathered everyone here today is because the supreme holy item that has been missing for many years, the Carnate Cardinal Treasure, has finally returned to the Jie sect today. What? The Carnate Cardinal Treasure of the Jie sect has returned. All the monsters shouted in shock when they heard the news. This news obviously shocked every monster. Through this conversation, Guhan could finally confirm one thing. All the monsters here were from the Jie sect back then. Incongruence Divine Mother and Lady Yunxiao were also fish that escaped the net after the Great God Investiture War. That's very interesting. The remaining evils of the Jie sect are actually hiding here. As the leader of these evils, will the Grandmaster of Heaven let this place go? He will definitely gather all these loyal disciples back, and we will definitely be able to find clues about sect leader Tongtian here, Ji Yuhan said in his heart. Chapter 1528. Patriarchs, we've been isolated from the outside world for hundreds of thousands of years. Apart from a group of humans that broke in 1,000 years ago, nothing else has come in. How did the primordial cardinal treasure of our Jie school come back? Which primordial cardinal treasure of our Jie school came back? Patriarchs, please tell us. One of the monsters below the stage said loudly. This primordial cardinal treasure was brought back by 2 human slaves. This primordial cardinal treasure is the supreme patriarch of our Jie school, the supreme sage in the world. It's also our master, the sect leader of Tongtian's sword, the Qingping sword. After Divine Mother Wudong finished speaking, all the monsters were shocked again. It's the Qingping sword. Oh my god, isn't that the legendary primordial cardinal treasure? I've only heard of the Qingping sword's name. I never imagined that the Qingping sword would really come back. Dad, what is this Qingping sword? Why haven't I heard of it before? There was a heated discussion below the stage. Many monsters knelt down excitedly and kowtowed to the sky when they heard the name of the Qingping sword. Most of the monsters were at a loss when they heard the name. It was obvious that the name of the Qingping sword had never appeared in their minds. To them, it was something very distant. Alright, I know everyone has a lot of questions, but we'll talk about them after we meet the Qingping sword. Come on. Bring the honorable and supreme sect leader of Tongtian's sacred item, the Qingping sword. Let us admire it. After Divine Mother Wudong finished speaking, she and Lady Yunxiao stood up from their chairs at the same time and knelt down towards the backstage. Seeing that Divine Mother Wudong and Lady Yunxiao had knelt down, the other monsters did not dare to act rashly no matter how powerful they were. They all knelt down along with the 2 patriarchs. In an instant, all the monsters present knelt down. Only a dozen monsters carrying a sedan slowly walked out from the backstage. On this luxuriously decorated sedan sat a chubby and cute little girl who was stuffing food into her mouth. What the hell is this? F***CK, isn't this the primordial cardinal treasure, the Qingping sword? Why is it a little girl now? That's right. She's clearly a little girl. How is that the Qingping sword? When the demons saw that the last primordial cardinal treasure was actually a little girl, they no longer cared about their respect. They jumped up from the ground and pointed at the little girl and shouted, "How dare you be so rude to Lord Qingping's sword?" Saint Mother Wudong, who was kneeling on the platform, was enraged. A bolt of lightning struck down from her body. The first demon who stood up and pointed at the Qingping sword was instantly turned into a pile of charcoal by Divine Mother Wudong's lightning. As for the other demons who stood up, their legs trembled in fear and they knelt down again, not daring to stand up again. F***CK. One day, I actually have to kneel down in front of this adorable Qingpin. Just who is the sword bearer, and who is the master? Seeing Qingpin sitting on the sedan, Guhan said with a bitter smile. He might not be the first sword bearer to kneel to his sword lady, but to Guhan, it was definitely the first time in his life. Guhan, I see you. Why are you kneeling? Are you going to propose to Qingpin? At the same time, Qingpin, who was sitting on the sedan, found Guhan who had turned into a demon through the connection between the sword lady and the sword bearer. He immediately asked Guhan curiously through the sword mark. But what's with this proposal? Does this adorable thing think that kneeling means asking for a proposal? Let's talk about it later. Qingpin, let me ask you. What happened to you? Why are you here? How did they treat you as a primordial treasure? Guhan asked Qingpin, and Qingpin told Guhan about his experience in detail. It turned out that Qingpin and the 2 little girls had a lot of fun, So the two little girls opened up to Qingpin and let down their guard. So, the two little girls brought Qingpin to the rocky beach and told Qingpin that they escaped from there. So, Qingpin touched one of the stones, and it opened the door to a different space. Qingpin and the two little girls were sucked back into the different space. When the two little girls saw that they had returned to their familiar environment, they happily ran back with Qingpin. On the way, they encountered demons. Of course, these demons would not be polite to Qingpin. One of them even wanted to whip Qingpin. Qingpin was not Guhan. She knew that she had to endure temporarily. She had a bad temper, so she slashed back with her sword and killed the demon. The killing caused a huge commotion and attracted all the monsters in the area. In the end, the great elder, Lady Yun Xiao, who was strolling around the area, was also attracted to her. There was probably no one in the world who was more familiar with the Qingping sword than Lady Yun Xiao. So, when the Qingping sword attacked, Lady Yun Xiao recognized the familiar sword aura and immediately stopped the other demons. In the beginning, Lady Yun Xiao wanted to speak nicely to the Qingping sword. However, the Qingping sword did not recognize Lady Yun Xiao and started fighting with her. Without Guhan by his side, the Qingping sword was no match for Yuan Ku's Lady Yun Xiao. It was captured by Lady Yun Xiao in just a few moves. Lady Yun Xiao did not dare to continue attacking the Qingping sword. Instead, she called Goddess Wudong over. The two of them studied the Qingping sword for a long time. After confirming that Qingpin was the Qingping sword, she immediately became extremely respectful to the Qingping sword. She even took out many things to entertain Qingpin. She treated Qingpin as if he was her ancestor. Of course, Lady Yun Xiao and Goddess Wudong also asked Qingpin's sword many questions. However, Qingpin's sword, who usually looked cute but was actually very cunning, did not know anything. He only cared about eating and enjoying his life. He did not answer any of their questions. Helplessly, Lady Yun Xiao and Goddess Wudong decided to announce the Qingping sword's identity to the others. Then, they would think of a way to communicate with the Qingping sword. That was how the story happened. Guhan, what should I do now? Do you want the two of us to kill all these annoying fellows together? Poor Qing said as he looked at the demons below the stage. He did not seem to realize that these demons were his disciples and grand disciples. Don't talk. Just sit there and do what you need to do. Eat what you need to eat. Listen to my orders. Guhan immediately instructed Qingpin. Guhan was very interested to know what would happen next. Oh. Hearing Jiyu Han's words, the poor man immediately felt relieved and began to eat the food in front of him without a care in the world. Guhan took a look and realized that the food in Qingpin's hand was a fried golden longevity fruit. Our Qingpin's appetite was indeed good. As long as it was meat, he could eat it. Translator, Atlas Studios editor. Atlas Studios. Although the situation was suppressed by Goddess Wudong's decisive killing, it did not stop the demons from letting their imaginations run wild. Goddess Yun Xiao said in an extremely cold voice, "You cats and dogs can transform into humans. Why can't swords transform into humans? Lady Qingping's sword is a carnate cardinal treasure. Her foundation surpasses all of us, and her spirituality surpasses all of us. It's only natural that she can transform into a human. You don't have to be surprised." Lady Yun Xiao's explanation instantly made the demons feel enlightened. That's right, if this cow could become a demon, then it was normal for a sword to become a demon. Lord Qingping's sword, could you please transform into your true form and let your disciples and grand disciples have a look so that they can be at ease? At the same time, Goddess Wudong knelt in front of the Qingping sword and said. The Qingping sword hesitated for a moment before nodding. Its body changed in the air and returned to the appearance of the Qingping sword. It really is Lord Qingping's sword. Seeing Qingping's sword form, Goddess Wudong and Lady Yun Xiao said excitedly. Some of the demons below the stage were even more excited. They shouted the names of the Qingping sword and the Grandmaster of Heaven. They were so excited that they almost fainted. Goddess Wudong and Lady Yun Xiao had never seen Qingping's true form before. They only realized that she was the Qingping sword after sensing Qingping's sword aura. Therefore, This was also their first time seeing the true form of the Qingpin sword. Before this, no matter how much the incongruent's Divine Mother and Lady Yun Xiao requested, the poor sword refused to transform into a sword. Who would have thought that it would change its voice so decisively this time? This made the incongruent's Divine Mother and Lady Yun Xiao overjoyed. It seemed like the Qingping sword still cared about the disciples and grand disciples of the Jie order. Otherwise, she would not have transformed into her true form when she saw so many disciples and grand disciples kneeling down. Of course, these two important figures didn't know that the reason Qingping's sword had transformed so decisively wasn't because he cared about his disciples and grand disciples. Instead, it was because Qingping had just communicated with Jiyu Han and obtained Jiyu Han's permission to transform. Otherwise, even if these disciples and grand disciples knelt until dawn, they wouldn't be able to make Qingping's sword transform. What's going on here? Why are all of you here? Didn't I hear that you abandoned your master and ran away? Sister Yun Xiao, you were suppressed under the Qilin cliff by old Lord Taishang and will never be able to rise again. Why are all of you here? The Qingpin sword suddenly asked in an extremely dignified voice. Of course, it was not Qingpin sword who said it. Instead, it was Guhan who said it through Qingpin sword. Elder Qingping, please listen to our explanation. When Goddess Wudong and Lady Yun Xiao saw that the Qingping sword finally spoke, they immediately poured out their stories excitedly like beans pouring out of a bamboo tube. Chapter 1529. After the battle of the 10,000 immortal array, Master and I were outnumbered. We were besieged by the 4 shameless old thieves, and Goddess Nua was also an accomplice. In the end, our Jie school suffered a great defeat. Tens of thousands of senior and junior brothers, as well as their disciples and grand disciples, were either killed or listed on the investiture of the gods. The most miserable ones were those who were captured by the Western sect. They actually used them as mounts, and they even castrated those poor senior and junior brothers. That's especially so for the 12 golden immortals of Chan school. Those bastards usually address us as brothers, senior brothers, and junior brothers. We didn't blame them for fighting in the myriad immortals formation. Even if we died in their hands, it was our fate. But they shouldn't have used our fellow disciples as mounts. Not only that, but they also broke the future of our fellow disciples. I hate them so much. I can't wait to kill all of them to avenge my master and my fellow disciples. But I knew that with my ability, I couldn't even deal with one of them. It was absolutely impossible to kill all of them. And at that critical moment, Master suddenly sent me a voice transmission, telling me to immediately return to Green Touring Palace and lead the remaining disciples and grand disciples in Green Touring Palace to escape, so as to prevent them from being slaughtered by those beasts. So I left the Myriad Immortals formation before the battle ended completely and rushed back to the Azure Palace before those beasts. However, my true form is that of a monkey. I can't compare to those immortal cranes, Kuan Pengs, and true dragons. By the time I was almost done cleaning up the Green Touring Palace, the people pursuing us had already arrived. All I could do was temporarily activate the Green Touring Palace's Dharma Protection Array. However, we were also trapped in Green Touring Palace. Although the Dharma Protection formation of the Azure Palace is very strong and only a sage like Master can control it completely, I can only control less than 10% of its power. But there are too many people coming to attack. The Dharma Protection formation is about to be broken and the other sages are likely to attack the Azure Palace. If that happens, we will be completely doomed. In my anxiety, I found that Master had left a brocade pouch in the back hall. He said that he had refined the fragment of the treasure-snatching rock into an alternate space that could be opened freely. As long as one entered the alternate space and sealed the door, even a sage would not be able to enter. So, I immediately brought everyone into this alternate dimension and hid until now. The story of the goddess of incongruence was over. The truth was as Guhan had guessed. These people were the remnants of Jie school after the God-Conferment War. Under the arrangement of the goddess of incongruence, they hid in this alternate dimension. Damn it! Damn it! Chan school, Ren School, and those bastards from the Western sect, they all deserve to die. They all have to die. Qing Ping suddenly roared. Her face became extremely furious, like a ferocious tiger that wanted to eat someone. After a long time, her emotions gradually calmed down. So that's how it is. Qing Pin put down the longevity fruit in his hand and looked at Yun Xiao. What about you, Yun Xiao? How did you get in? Did you also come in with the goddess of incongruence? I'm not. I'm ashamed to say it, but even now, I still haven't figured out how I got in. Yun Xiao smiled bitterly and began to narrate her experience. Back then, in the Nine Bends Yellow River Formation, the Grand Supreme Elder and the Heavenly Lord of Primordial Beginning bullied the weak. Their disciples could not deal with us, so in the end, they took action themselves. They took away our primordial chaos golden chalice, swallowed our golden flood dragon scissors, and even killed my poor sisters, Qiong Xiao and Bai Xiao. I was the only one who was suppressed by the Grand Supreme Elder Lord under the Chilean Cliff for an unknown number of years. I've heard of this before. However, your younger sisters, Qiong Xiao and Bai Xiao, did not die. They only ran to the heavenly courts to become two fairies. However, only you did not go on the god roll with your two sisters. Instead, you were suppressed under the Chilean Cliff and never appeared again. Qing Ping said with a hint of doubt in her eyes. However, this question was not asked by Guhan through Qing Pin, but by Qing Ping herself. Moreover, the Chilean Cliff is not the Chilean Cliff in the mortal world. It is the Chilean Cliff in the universe map, the carnate cardinal treasure of Taishang Larojun. It's said that the scroll of the universe is a dimensional world second only to the origin world, and the entire world has been refined by Taishang Larojun. Unless Taishang Larojun dies, no one can escape from the scroll of the universe. How did you get out? This is also what I'm curious about. Yun Xiao, I've already said before that I still don't know how I escaped. Yun Xiao, I was trapped under the Chilean Cliff for at least tens of thousands of years. Just when Yun Xiao was about to completely forget about the past, the universe map suddenly began to shake violently, and the entire world began to collapse. The Chilean Cliff that suppressed me was the first to collapse, and I escaped from the Chilean Cliff. However, although I left the suppression of the Chilean Cliff, I still could not escape from the universe map. Just as the world in the universe map was about to collapse, and I was about to perish with the universe map, a golden light suddenly shot out from the outside and shone on me. Suddenly, a golden light shot out from the outside and shone on my body, pulling me out of the map of heaven and earth. When I opened my eyes again, I was outside the ruins of the Bio Palace. I wandered around the ruins in a daze for a few days, and suddenly discovered the secret hidden in the treasure-snatching rock. It just so happened that I had a talisman in my body given by my master, so I directly entered this strange space and met senior sister Wudang again. Yun Xiao finished the story with a puzzled face. You're saying that you didn't escape by yourself, but someone rescued you from the map of the world. Qing Ping Sword frowned and said, that's not right. I know that the universe map and I are both carnate cardinal treasures. Once it recognizes you as its master, unless the master dies, even a sage can't rescue you from the universe map. What? The Grand Supreme Elder is dead. Why did you only tell me now? Qingping Sword's expression suddenly changed, and she suddenly muttered to herself in a strange manner. Then, the murderous aura on her body disappeared in an instant, and she returned to her previous harmless and adorable appearance. I know. The paw started to work hard to eat the longevity fruit again. As he ate, he told everyone a shocking piece of news: the Grand Supreme Old Lord is already dead. The Heaven and Earth map has lost its master, so it is only natural for it to destroy itself. By the way, when were you released? How long have you been here? I'm not too sure about the specifics. It's been about 1,000 years. Yun Xiao looked at the Qingping Sword curiously. She did not know why the other party's emotions had changed so much in such a short period of time, but she still told him everything in detail. At that time, the entire world was in chaos. A group of human refugees gathered around me, and they were being chased by some people I had never seen before. At that time, I just so happened to find a way to enter this alternate dimension, and just so happened to open the door to this alternate dimension. Those refugees also followed me in. Based on this, it seems that it has indeed been 1,000 years. It turned out that the human refugees in this dimension had all been let in by Yun Xiao. Then I understand, Qingpin said thoughtfully, while Yun Xiao and Wu Dang were extremely curious. How could this Qingping figure out something that they had not been able to figure out in 1,000 years just by listening to a few words? Could it be that Lord Qingping knew something that no one knew about? Thinking of this, Yun Xiao and Wu Dang immediately turned their fervent gazes towards Qingping. Ancestor Qingping, what exactly do you understand? What exactly is going on? Yun Xiao could not help but ask. Humph, of course, it's because our master is mighty. He fought against 6 people alone outside. Not only did he kill the 5 sages who humiliated us in the past, but he also killed the mean, ungrateful, biased old bastard, Hong Jun, who pretended to be fair and generous. Qingpin hesitated for a while and then announced loudly and excitedly. What he said scared the hell out of Saint Incongruence and Lady Yun Xiao. What the hell was that? How could Hong Jun ancestor, who was extremely powerful and suppressed the whole world in their impression, be killed by their master? Wasn't this a little too inconceivable? Ahem. I knew you wouldn't believe it. This is what happened. Qingpin coughed and told the 2 disciples of the tribe of Jie what happened after the God Investiture War. According to the poor man, after Sect Master Tongtian was defeated, Hong Jun ancestor was extremely abominable. He captured Sect Master Tongtian indiscriminately and locked him up in the Purple Cloud Palace. He wanted to punish Sect Master Tongtian to stay in the Purple Cloud Palace until the end of the world. Sect Master Tongtian had already accepted his fate. However, when he accidentally heard about his disciple's tragic experience, he instantly became angry and said that he wanted to go down and save his disciple. Hong Jun ancestor naturally did not agree. As a result, Sect Master Tongtian was so angry that he fought with Hong Jun ancestor. In the beginning, Sect Master Tongtian was definitely unable to defeat Hong Jun ancestor. Seeing that Sect Master Tongtian was about to die in Hong Jun ancestor's hands, Sect Master Tongtian suddenly comprehended some earth-shattering power. He risked his life and killed Hong Jun ancestor. When the other 5 sages found out, they were, of course, terrified. Therefore, they took the 4 fairy-killing swords and prepared to kill Sect Master Tongtian when he was seriously injured to completely calm down the chaos. However, Sect Master Tongtian, who had an epiphany, was extremely powerful. Even though he was seriously injured, the 5 sages could only barely suppress Sect Master Tongtian. In the end, they died together with Sect Master Tongtian. This war also caused the whole main world and all the dimensional worlds to become chaotic. All kinds of monsters in the dimensional worlds appeared in the main world. That was what Yun Xiao saw after she escaped. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.